here shortly. It might be, hey, Austin, I'm going to unmute myself on mine.
Okay.
In the past, Shane has had to mute me directly from his.
Okay.
So I'm going to unmute this, and maybe if you...
Big Z said that he got it, so I don't know if this is double audio or not, but...
Okay, are you going to Big Z? Can you still hear me here?
Big Z, help us out.
Yeah, I'll say help us out here if you can hear me. That would be outstanding if we're live now. Would appreciate that. Any heads up you guys can give us that we are live would be terrific. Steven says we've got sound. All right, perfect. Austin's the man here. We appreciate that. Welcome in to Hurrdat Sports Radio. AM 590 ESPN Omaha will hopefully be with us shortly. ESPN Tri-Cities. We are live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We're here, guys. It's Iowa Day. That's the important thing. We've got a football game today. Make sure, Austin, when you come over here, make sure you mute that mic because I'm getting a little feedback from you on that one. Yeah. But we have a football game today, Iowa and Nebraska. Oh, that one was mine. There we go.
Just trying to get it figured out. We got it.
Okay,
we got it now.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go.
We'll get there.
We're cooking with gas now. That's all right. Actually, you know, this does go to show that how important Shane is to the show because
100%.
He actually is on vacation today. That's why we're having technical difficulties.
And a much needed vacation for Shane. We should
100%.
Yes.
My guy never takes a day off. So glad he got to spend some time with family over there. But yes, I agree. The Black Shirts, Nebraska, gonna beat the brakes off of Iowa today. We certainly hope so. Would love to see that as a nice little topping to the Thanksgiving weekend. Would be outstanding. We love a Hawkeye beatdown the day after Thanksgiving. We do have a good show for you coming up today. Now that we are actually started, we love it here. As I mentioned, my guy Austin Jacobsen is joining me here today. He's actually leaving for Iowa City directly after this show is over.
Well, you know,
so we appreciate the commitment of you being here.
It's a communal trip, right? We are on a mission trip to see and serve the better cause, the better purpose. You get that, right?
I do. Yeah.
You went to seminary or somewhere around there
in the neighborhood.
Yeah. So it's the same process, right? Something like that.
100%. Coming up on the show, we will have Tim Verghese.
I'm excited to talk to Tim.
Tim's great. Tim is a certified ball knower. We love Tim.
He dropped his age. He carbon dated himself on Twitter the other day.
Yeah, is he 24?
Yeah, hurt my feelings.
Yeah, bro.
Hurt my feelings. Can't believe that.
Yeah. If I had a misspent youth, he could be my child.
Respect. Very nice.
It would have had to be pretty misspent for that to be the case, but not impossible.
Not impossible.
Tim Verghese will join us at 8 from inside Nebraska. 8:30, we will talk to Coach Laura Bird Kuhn of the Omaha Supernovas. They had their draft this week and had it right here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. It was a phenomenal experience. Got a bunch of current Huskers, former Huskers. Allie Batenhorst will be making her way back to Nebraska this winter as part of the Supernova. So that's super exciting. We'll talk to Coach Bird at 8:30. At 9, we will talk to my normal co-host, Damon Benning. He is already in Iowa City. He will be part of the broadcast as always, but wanted to check in with him. And then at 9:45, we'll wrap up the show with Matt Vrzal from former Husker and owner of Paison's Pizzeria, and who did a great job on the call this week for the Nebraska Public Media broadcast on Monday of the state championships. So we switched out DB for Mike Sauter this morning because we talked to Mike on Tuesday, and I like DB. Gotta check in with good old DB.
Well, and we have a little reprieve in high school athletics. So
for like a week.
Yeah, you get your Gatorade scrimmages either today or tomorrow. You get to do some of the soap scrimmage stuff. I know some of Class A will do some of their jamboree games earlier in this week for basketball, but the next week is when it kind of kicks off. Just feels so late.
It does.
Feels very late.
It's about, it's the same time every year, right? But because it happens so far after college basketball starts, it does feel a little delayed. But So I got to ask, Austin, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was great. I had some of the best food in the world, and I know that you're going to just give me all the haterade possible.
Ooh, where's the ribeye? Can we get something more unique in here, please?
Did you guys go to Kearney, or did you come out here?
We traveled down to Kearney Wednesday night, and then I came back last night. So, yeah, good short trip. But, yeah, Western Nebraska, tell you what.
That's central Nebraska.
That's going to get some people riled up. Tell you what, it's going to get some people riled up.
So you guys do the traditional Thanksgiving food?
Yeah. So Thanksgiving is my mom's number one holiday.
Okay,
this is Angie's number one holiday. If she could pick any of them out of the year, probably do Arbor Day and then Thanksgiving. Those are probably her two go-tos.
Big Arbor Day,
I guess. But yeah, it's the one thing that she has it like listed. She's done it like 10 years or maybe even longer in a row where we've hosted like our extended family.
Yeah.
And she has it scheduled down pat. Everyone has what they're supposed to bring. She cooks everything else. She starts it the day before. She's got pie. She's got everything. It was beautiful. Stuffing, number one Thanksgiving food, by the way, in case you're curious.
Stuffing.
Do love me some stuffing.
I can respect that.
Stuffing's a food we need to eat more of, in my opinion.
So there is such a huge variance on stuffing because good stuffing is very, very good.
Yes.
Bad stuffing
is very bad.
Horrifyingly bad.
The
variance in stuffing is incredibly wide.
I like mine with a little crisp. I need to get it like it needs a
little crust.
Yes,
almost.
It's got the crust and texture.
Yeah.
I want the breadcrumb and all that sort of good stuff in there. I need it to have that like flavoring, like soaking up. It needs to be able to soak, right?
Yeah.
But then you go into like the bad side, and if it's just mush, you just put it down on a plate and it looks like.
Or if it's like overly dry,
then you could be having a rough day.
You run into some problems in a hurry there.
So what did you do, you non-turkey man?
Yeah, so I don't love traditional Thanksgiving food. We did tacos giving. So we did a taco bar and a nacho bar. It was incredible. It was great.
Okay.
I would suggest it to everyone. It's way less work than normal turkey food or normal Thanksgiving food.
That's mean.
It is a lot less work. Like cooking a turkey is kind of a whole ordeal, right? But no, we did taco and nacho bar. It was outstanding.
I respect that.
It was great. We did do some traditional pies. I do like the pies.
Tacos and pies.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. You can eat pie with anything. Really. Let's be honest here. Pie is
you?
Yeah, pie is universal.
I don't know about that.
We went to so did you go out to Val's at all this year? The pumpkin patch.
Oh, in Granite? No,
yeah.
No.
So my wife is obsessed with Val's.
Okay.
She's gone every year since she was a kid, just loves it, right? But they have this pie barn out there.
A pie barn?
Yeah, it's a barn. They just make pies. It's fantastic.
This is news.
So they do that during Halloween and everything, but then they also you can order a pie for Thanksgiving. And so we went out. They have, I don't even know the name of it. It's like a brown butter salted honey pie. It's basically just a sugar bomb. It's incredible though. It's so good. It might be the best pie I've ever had in my life.
I think pies are one of the few desserts in the world that the more adjectives you add to it, the better it does.
I think that's accurate, actually.
Because to me, the best pie I can get is a strawberry rhubarb pie, and that's only 2.
Yeah.
But like you can add so many more different things. I've had like the brown crumble strawberry rhubarb pie. Oh, fantastic.
Crumbles are great.
It's also a very Western Nebraska thing of me to like strawberry rhubarb. Just saying that.
Steven says
Ashworth?
Pecan. No, Young Steve, or my actually guy. He's a big pecan. My dad's a big pecan pie guy.
Isn't it pecan?
I think it's pecan if you're like below the Mason-Dixon.
Oh,
I think that's how they say it.
Is Sydney, Nebraska below the Mason-Dixon? Because that's how I've known it as.
Getting closer. I believe. I don't know. The only people I've ever heard call it pecan pie are from the South. I don't know. Maybe it's more rural versus urban thing, not a north-south thing. I just made some assumptions there. But no, it's true though, because like apple pie, good.
Yes.
Salted caramel crumble apple pie, better.
The more words you add in front of your fruit of the pie, and I'll die on this hill too. Chocolate pie is great. I do like chocolate pie, but fruit pie is the meaning of pie.
Oh, I love fruit pie. I'm an apple pie truther.
Yes,
I love apple pie.
I will go as far.
I'll take apple over pumpkin any day of the week.
Yes, I'm right there. I'll go as far as mulberry, but there is a steep drop off after there. I like, some people have done cranberry pie. I can handle.
Yeah.
Cherry pie is obviously, great. And then you go down the line, apple, the strawberry rhubarb, all that good stuff. When we start to get to like apricot.
Have you ever had a peach pie?
I have had a peach pie.
Peach is not bad.
Peach isn't bad. Yeah.
Now,
but it has a tendency to go real bad real quick too.
Yes, you are, especially this might be a hot take with cherry here. The quality of the cherry or peach goes a long way.
100%.
Whereas, like, I feel like the quality of the apple does not matter that much.
Yep.
Like, you can just throw any old apple in there.
Apple pie, banana bread are kind of on the same level of, like, doesn't really matter how good the fruit could be.
Whatever. Yeah, it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But a lot of the other fruit pies are very dependent on how good the fruit is.
This is a shocking conversation to have on the game day.
Well, it's not a shocking conversation to have the day after Thanksgiving.
Correct. Yes, very true.
I'm sure we'll have some Thanksgiving talk throughout the day as well. But we do have a lot of football to get to. Before we were off air, Eric asked me if I was just delighting in the downfall of UConn.
You have to be having a good
time. I'm just like a pig in slop. I'm just so happy. I'm also happy that I did not accidentally slip up and use the other version of that phrase.
Yeah.
Although I don't think we're
not on radio.
Yeah, it's
technically
fine.
We think
we can say anything we want at this point. That's why I got away with the pecan reference.
Yeah, there you go. As someone who is, contractually obligated to listen to the show every day, I think you've said far worse.
Oh, 100% I have. Yeah. It's kind of funny to me because, just a little behind the curtain here. So you listen to the show every day because you're posting podcasts, you're up with the clips and stuff. You remember way more of the show than I do.
Yeah.
Like, it's sort of a fever dream sometimes when I'm up here with DB and I'm like, what did we talk about today? You just, like, 10 o'clock comes over and I'm like, what have I been doing for the last 3 hours? Where am I?
And that has to be the most, like, we talked about this after the show Tuesday, that sometimes someone will just, like, come up to you and be like, oh, I love that when you talked about this on the show. And you're, sure. Yeah, I did.
I'm just like,
that was me.
That does sound like me. But, when you talk this much, sometimes it doesn't all retain here. So.
Yeah. Especially when a lot of, BS is coming out. That's the worst part is you have to keep track of, like, all the other things that you've said. But
I mean, when you're just dropping so many truth bombs about Danny Hurley being the worst, like, it's hard to keep track of.
That is true.
Although I will say the two things people come up to me and talk about the most are Bo Jackson. Actually, there's 3. There's Bo Jackson, there's Trevor Lawrence, and there's Deion Sanders. One of those 3 things is almost always. Otherwise, it's like just, generic Nebraska.
Yeah.
How are they going to do this week?
Yeah.
And you know what? Today, I'm feeling good.
I do too.
I'm feeling good.
I'm still shocked the line is where it's at.
So it's come down.
It has.
It has come down.
And quite a bit, too. Like, more than you usually see a line drop from, like, a Saturday night, Sunday posting, because it started at, like, 8.5 or 7.5.
Oh, I didn't see it that high. The highest I saw it was 5.5.
Yeah, I saw it was Sunday. It was like 7.5. So it's like significantly come down.
I didn't look until Monday morning, so it very well could have been 6.5 or 7 on Sunday. It's down to 3 now.
That's
so
nuts.
Obviously some money has come in on Nebraska, which we love to see.
Is that positivity from Husker fans putting money on Nebraska, or is that like the real Vegas line changing? Because 3 points, I mean, everyone says, college football, especially home field, gets you 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So we're basically talking about a push at this point.
Yeah. So typically, I haven't looked it up there's some sites you can look up sharp money versus public money.
Yeah.
I would typically, the line doesn't move that dramatically with public money because if they think they're right on their line, they'll try and even it out some, but they'll just be like, hey, we'll take your money. That's fine.
Yes.
We are happy
100%.
to take your money. If it's sharp money that's coming in, though, that'll move the line a lot faster.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing it's some combination of both, but I would guess there has to be some sharp money in there too for it to move that dramatically. And it happened fast, right? So it was down to -3 by like Wednesday. And now we're still hanging in there. So I'm guessing a big chunk came in on Nebraska early from some people that matter, which is not people like me.
And would never.
Your casual bettor who looks at lines, and we'll do that and bet on it later in the show today. But there's a couple stinky lines in there, and I'm trying to decide if I want to try and take the free money or if Vegas knows something. We will get to that later for sure. But I do have to ask. So obviously, Thanksgiving, food, and football; those are the big things, right? How does Matt Eberflus still have a job this morning?
That was insane.
How does that?
It's Central Time in Chicago right now, so he's probably been up a couple of hours.
You think he went
I
to
assume
sleep?
the owners are like probably at the facility now working on the paperwork, but this could have been. I mean, you played the early Thanksgiving game. You could have had this done.
This could have been done yesterday.
Unless it's like a Christmas firing where they're like, well, we don't want someone to work on Thanksgiving, so they're just going to put in the paperwork today. But yeah, absolutely bonkers. I mean, I've never seen a team try to tank without trying to tank. I mean, that's the most if that was the Panthers or like the Raiders, like, everyone would have been like, that is egregious. Yeah, that's egregious trying to get the number 1 pick. I mean, that was horrific. That was terrible.
The worst part might be he doubled down on it in the post game. He's like, I like the way that went. We did the right thing. It's like, did you do the right thing? You have a timeout. You've got 32 seconds left. You are technically, I mean, it would have been a 58-yard field goal. That's a long field goal, but you're down 3. You're in field goal range. And you don't even get a kickoff.
Yeah.
That, to me, probably not how you wanted that to go.
He probably had PTSD from the Packer game. He was like, I can't have another one of these blocked.
It's better than not getting – he probably was like, hey, if I don't get it blocked, it's a win. It's like, no, getting it blocked would have been better than how that went down, bud.
Listen, Matt, as fans who used to be injured by blocked kicks and bad kickers and all that good stuff, you just have to give him another chance.
You got to give him a shot.
You got to give him a shot.
Look at John Hole.
John Hole's our best friend now.
Guy couldn't make a kick in practice.
I saw 2 John Hole jerseys for the Wisconsin game.
Really?
Yes. And I heard because it's 30. Yeah. So I was like, oh, well, that's not or no, he's 90, isn't he?
90.
Yeah, 90. And I remember thinking, I was like, well, there's plenty of other 90s that have been. And then I walked by them, and it was Hole across the back, and I was like, I hope your family. That's crazy. Because if you bought that after like Ohio State or something, good for you.
Maybe they
were the NIL.
Maybe they were James Williams fans, and they just put like the
tape over it.
It's like we're Hole fans now.
Yes.
No, it's been an incredible turnaround for John Hole, obviously. But yeah, I'm sitting there and I go, and that's kind of why when people, because every once in a while, I don't know if you've experienced this. Every once in a while, people are like, well, don't you think the coaches would know better? And the answer is sometimes no.
Yeah, and what's the other crazy part, too, is that I think what's lost in this whole conversation is there was 11 Chicago Bears on the field that were also, that none of them, recognized it. And so I think, in a complete, deterioration of the Bears right now, you can just tell that either, A, the Bears as a franchise and as an organization and offense especially just do not have the ability to recognize those issues and or they just completely have such blind trust in Matt Eberflus to do the right decision that they too were shocked at the end of the game.
Well, so I did hear that so Caleb Williams had called a timeout earlier in the drive. So I don't know if he had been reprimanded for using that timeout and then was kind of like, okay, well, I'm not going to use another one.
Right.
Or what exactly happened there. But that is that case. It's an institutional failure, as you mentioned, right? It's not just on Matt Eberflus. It's also on his entire coaching staff being like, hey, should we get a timeout here?
True, yeah.
I mean, maybe they were.
And you're the NFL. You have a strategic timing person that's on your sideline or in a booth, talking to you.
And maybe they were. Maybe they're like, hey, we're kind of clicking here, bud. Timeout.
22.
Do we want a timeout? Do we want a timeout? And he goes. He's like, I thought we'd get the playoff by 18 seconds. They snapped it with 6, by the way. It was 4 or 6 seconds left. It's like, okay, well, I thought I'd get it with 18 seconds. Okay, so when you got to 18 seconds and you weren't even in the neighborhood of running a play, was that not the cue to – because I understand what he was saying, right?
Yeah.
I understand hey, we wanted to save the timeout after we used that play so that we could get the kicking team on the field out. Totally understand that, right? But at a certain point, you have to realize, hey – we're not going to get the playoff in time. We have to save time here.
Yeah, there's nobody who loves taking a timeout to Thanksgiving more than Matt Eberflus, that's for sure. I'll give him this. At least he gave families across the nation who decided to eat a little bit later in the day something to talk about.
True.
Right?
True.
Because of, it's been a decisive year. There's been a lot of things, or divisive year.
Yeah.
Let's try to use our words correctly. But, it's been one of those years you had a lot of things to talk about. You're trying to avoid your crazy uncle or aunt who might have, a crazy hot take on something or another. But at least you could both come together and talk about Matt Eberflus.
100%.
Maybe he did it for that.
Apparently, Caleb said in the post-game presser that he just does what he's told. So I'm guessing he got ripped for that first time out.
That's crazy.
And that's all the way out on Matt Eberflus.
But that's the Bears being so bad.
Yes.
Because you have a generational talent quarterback.
Yeah.
And a guy that's won a Heisman Trophy is your number 1 overall pick. All of these attributes and traits that you trust in him, you name him the starting quarterback in May.
And you're letting him be coached by that guy.
And you tell him that he can't do certain things on the field. Even if he were to do it wrong, why are you trying to tell him in the moment that that's not the correct thing?
Yeah.
Pull him out on a Tuesday during practice and film and be like, hey, we misused this timeout,
Yeah.
but we still, at the end of the day, had a chance to like kick the game-winning field goal. And that's the worst part about this whole thing. He was reprimanded for that, just doing what he's told, and they still lost.
Yeah.
They had a better chance with what he was doing than what they ended up doing in the first place.
Well, and it's just that is a poverty franchise.
Yes.
I mean, as much as I make fun of the Jets, which are just as bad, maybe worse, it's hard to tell. We're on the scales of suctitude here.
Yes.
Like there's varying degrees, but they are such a poverty franchise that even if you get someone in as a good coach and knows what they're doing, DB brought this up on Wednesday. Like, yeah, you could get a Mike Vrabel or somebody like that in there, but is the organization so dysfunctional that would even matter?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was my concern with D'Amico Ryans in Houston a couple years ago when he took that job, but I mean, there isn't nearly the history with Houston of being dysfunctional for so long. Like, this has been a decades-long issue in Chicago. I mean, we're almost 40 years past the Super Bowl for Chicago in '85. Like, this has been a problem for a long time. The Texans haven't even existed for that long.
And like through and through, they have these just cycles of they will get one decent year, but they're never going to be the team that breaks through. Like when they went with Trubisky, like 12-4, you never thought, well, the Bears are going to make a Super Bowl run here.
Because you're like, Mitch Trubisky's never winning a Super Bowl.
Yes, right. And it's just,
or like, even they made the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman, and you're like, Rex Grossman's never going to win a Super Bowl. Like, that's not a thing that's going to happen.
You just never get the sense that the Bears are like all rowing the boat in the same direction at all times. Like,
basically,
there's always
they never feel like the Lions.
Yeah. Well,
like
sure.
The Lions now,
right? Yes,
like
they finally have everything going in the right.
The Bears have never felt like the Lions do right now.
Right. Yes.
Where you've got, I don't even know who owns the Lions because I don't ever hear
the Ford
about
family.
Sure, duh. But like, I never even think about it because it's like, hey, Dan Campbell's our guy. He leads the franchise. Everybody's rolling in the right direction. Like, nobody cares about anything else.
Yep.
I don't care who their GM is. I don't care who their owner is. I don't know anything about their front office except for the fact that they've drafted really well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any of that because Dan Campbell's the face of my franchise more than almost any other franchise in the league. That head coach is the face of the franchise.
Yes.
And then you've got a really well-coached, well-oiled machine with the players underneath him and a couple great coordinators. And Chicago's never felt like that.
No.
As dysfunctional as Detroit's been forever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as the history of the league, they're as bad of a franchise as you get. They have figured it out in a way that the Bears cannot seem to.
Outside of Ditka and maybe Lovie Smith on this, there's been no head coach in Bears history that's like a true alpha guy that's like, I mean, like you said, is like the face of a franchise, that is the guy that when you put the promotional poster out, like he's the guy on the front side, right?
Yeah.
And that's why they are not going to hire a Mike Vrabel in the offseason. That's why they're not going to get someone that's going to be this number one type coach. They're going to get some subordinate offensive or defensive coordinator that's on a second or third tier team. They're gonna
they're gonna get a Mike McCarthy.
Yes, I mean
some mayonnaise sandwich.
More than likely, probably yes.
Yeah,
they're going to find out someone like that.
They might get actual Mike McCarthy. He's going to be available soon.
And the Bears' ability to hire people that are a year past their expiration date is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, you start with John Fox.
Oh,
John Fox, being a Panther fan, John Fox was great, but he had clearly been like the game had passed him by.
He was done.
And then you hire the Canadian football coach, Tressman, and then you go back to Eberflus. So you're just all over. And then, of course, the Matt Nagy experience, which was fantastic.
Incredible for everyone.
I miss a good Matt Nagy press conference.
You know,
Those were always fun.
Obviously, you've got, like, if you want to go like way back in the day, but this is, I think, to your point, you know, you've got like your George Halas or whatever from the Bears, but like that's not, I mean, first of all, it's ancient history.
Yes.
And second, you're not like in a face of the franchise moment at that point in the league. Like we're basically talking like 70s and 80s on.
Yes.
Where you've got, you know, your actual sort of superstars of the NFL. And I wouldn't put Lovie Smith in that category for sure, because that dude has no personality. He was a pretty good football coach for them, which is fair. But like they haven't had.
I wish he was still the Illinois coach. That would make things a lot easier.
Man, he had, from somebody that knows a lot of Illinois people, that man had no interest in being there at any point. That was He was just cashing checks. It was unbelievable.
Good for him.
I mean, I guess I will say the Illinois beard that he grew was
it was
epic.
fantastic.
That was
man can grow a good beard.
He does.
The 1 year Houston beard was also a very good one too.
God, I forgot that they hired him at Houston after he got fired.
That was the craziest fever dream of a season because they were literally like just tank. They were like lose 14 games, you get paid.
It was the only one that's weirder than that to me because I think they actually thought it was a good hire was the Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona thing because he got fired at Texas Tech.
That was weird. Yeah.
Took the USC offensive coordinator job because he didn't think he was going to get another job, and then got an NFL head coaching job because, of course, the Cardinals. But at least the Texans, I think, knew on purpose. That's like, oh, yeah, Lovey's going to suck.
Yes.
That's our guy.
Yep. We need someone. And you can spin it, too, because you're like, oh, he created a great defense, and he did all these. Oh, yeah,
he's got experience.
Fantastic.
It's a young roster and whatever. It's like, no, you guys are just paying him to be 1-15 or whatever so you can get a high draft pick here. But, no, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how long Matt Eberflus is going to have a job. There is some people – so apparently the Bears have the never fired a coach in season streak that I guess is very important to them for some reason. That is the only reason I can think of why that man is still employed today. But
what good are you doing though in that situation?
I agree. Like there's no, especially with the quarterback situation the way it is with Caleb Williams. I think you do kind of have to send a signal. It's like, hey, we're going to move on because. You hear Caleb Williams yesterday, he's talking about, I just do what I'm told and whatever. Like, he doesn't really seem to be in love with that situation. You probably need that to not go south if you're the Bears, is to keep him happy and on the same page. So I would just, if for no other reason, to be like, hey, Caleb, we're going to take care of this. Don't worry about it, bud. Like, you
should. I mean, you should.
You really
should go back and make sure that your number one quarterback is happy because as many people like to think in the NFL when it comes to these uber talented players, yes, that in 5 years when they pick up his option and whatnot, they could keep him for those 5 years. But if Caleb didn't like how he was treated over 5 years and maybe he doesn't have the greatest stats and whatnot, I think we've seen plenty of number one quarterbacks get more opportunities over time. And Caleb played one of them yesterday.
Yeah. And
I think Jared Goff's pretty happy on his second team. I wonder if Caleb Williams, after a couple of years, might just be looking at his watch and saying, I can't wait to get on mine.
Yeah, well, not just that, but like over the course of the time he's with the Bears, like you have to get the best out of him. It's not just what if he signs somewhere else? It's what if we waste these 5 years of control over a quarterback where we can put together a great roster and we wasted a number one pick because we couldn't figure it out with the head coach? I mean, that's the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at it with – whether it's like Daniel Jones in New York or any of these other Sam Darnold, like all these guys that are retreading now, and apparently all of them in Minnesota, like all these guys that are retreading now, that's the missed opportunity.
Yep.
You would love to have a guy for 10, 15 years, but the bigger missed opportunity is, we completely botched this first round quarterback pick and we just lost 5 years of our franchise because of it. And the rest of the Bears roster is pretty good. And that's the worst part is that's a pretty good team outside of their head coach who cannot properly manage 32 seconds, which
crazy.
Is, again, why sometimes it's like, I don't know that the coach does always know better. Sometimes the coach is Matt Eberflus, and in that case, he does not know better.
I pray for all of the Bears Huskers fans that have had to endure some of the years over the past few. And I know that there's many because we're in a weird tie-in here in this state where there's a conglomerate of Bronco Huskers, mostly Chief Huskers.
Yeah.
There's some Packer Huskers, Bear Huskers, Viking Huskers.
Yep.
And then you get, your sporadic ones like here and there. And
yeah.
But I fear for their sanity for this weekend.
The fun 49er Huskers like me as well. Coming up next, we will wrap up hour number one here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. That's Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla. We'll be back here in a little bit.
We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up hour number one here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We should be up and live on all of our places. Thanks to our fearless leader, Sasha, for coming in and helping us out there.
Chat says thanks, Sasha.
That's Austin Jacobsen with me. I'm Ravi. Lulla. DB is in Iowa City. We'll talk to him a little bit later. Before we talk to Tim, though, I want to get into a couple things that I think the two big questions for the Nebraska-Iowa game for me.
Okay.
And we can dig into them, but I'm going to give them both to you off the top here. Number one, can Nebraska's offense replicate anything close to what we saw against Wisconsin?
Mm-hmm.
Number two, can Nebraska's defense keep Caleb Johnson in check?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Caleb Johnson's probably a bigger question mark, right? Because of some of the, I don't know if they're tackling issues, if they were just schematic or just, bad position on the initial snap against Wisconsin. But there were a couple of times you felt like Nebraska's defense, who's been generally in the course of the season, has been pretty good. But it's almost more reminiscent of the, what year was it Nebraska went to the Big Ten championship against Wisconsin? That defense. Was that 2012?
Yeah.
This year's defense reminds me a lot of that. That was a pretty good defense, but the moments that they fell off,
they got gashed.
Yeah. And I have a fear for today that same scenario could happen. But as Damon usually says, a lot of it happens pre-snap. If you're in the correct alignment, and especially against Iowa, they recognize and can check in and out of a lot of things to make sure that you're one shade over the wrong side. They will move their running back or a block and a tackle over to wash you down. And then it's instead of a 2-yard run, a 6-yard run. And then a 6-yard run by the third quarter becomes an 8-yard run. An 8-yard run turns into a 15-yard run. Mm-hmm. That's my fear, is that they're going to run the ball 50 times.
Yeah.
You just have to be able to endure and be able to be lined up correctly in all 50 snaps that they'll line up against you.
So I think I agree that this defense has overall been good, but when they get beat, it's bad, right? But I think, and I didn't chart this or anything, so this is anecdotally, it seems like when they get beat, it's almost always through the air.
Yes. Well, the Indiana game, obviously, that's the gash. Yeah.
The Ohio State one with Jeremiah Smith, where he just runs by everybody. You had it with USC with
Maeva.
Yeah, with Maeva, and I was trying to remember which
was
Branch.
Yep.
Branch did it on
and then obviously the Wisconsin post route.
Yes.
At the end when everyone was feeling good. Classic.
And to just throw one in there just to make you nervous, right?
Yeah.
So it seems like it's typically in the passing game where if they're going to give something up, that's usually what it is. That, I think, is good news against Iowa because they're playing like a 12th string quarterback, and it's not like they're a dynamic passing offense in general. Caleb Johnson, incredible, right? But if you're like, hey, Stratton, like, go for it, bud, I'll probably take my chances there, And so I will say that is a positive to me is that most of the time, and that's not to say that they haven't gotten gash running a handful of times this season as well, because they have, but especially lately, the thing that we seem typically most worried about, and with good reason, is guys just miscommunicating on the back end and losing a guy.
Yeah.
Right. That's the thing that's been the most frustrating is like Gifford and Singleton are supposed to hand guys off and that just doesn't happen for whatever reason.
And it's never something like a crazy route concept. It appears. It never is like a trick play where they just get put in the wrong position. It truthfully is almost fundamental that it's just one lapse of judgment, the wrong assignment, one guy carries over to the wrong side, and it just looks that way, right?
I think it's mostly miscommunication.
Yeah.
I like at the end of the day, because, and DB's talked a lot about this, a lot of it's like you're trying to disguise what you're trying to do until super late in the snap count, at least until after 15 seconds when the headset cuts off so they can't communicate anymore. And then communication gets lost somewhere between that point and the play. And so you've got, I think when Coach Rule says like, hey, when we're in a cover two, you got to play cover two. Part of that is knowing that you're in the cover two, right? And so I think it's a miscommunication thing more than anything. And that's why, we'll talk about this a little bit later. We'll get to some keys to the game and things like that. But I do think you might see some new faces back there.
I was just going to ask you the conversation of simplicity and younger talent instead of more complex schemes and maybe veteran players that don't have the same talent level. That was a conversation last week before you get to bowl eligibility because you were just going to throw anything at the wall to get a win.
100%.
But against Iowa, the most basic and simple of defense might be what's more successful. So having your more talented players on the field, I wonder if this conversation comes back up again. And like you said, we see just a fresh rotation of a lot of younger players coming in because of the ability to just say, hey, we're going to put our most talented guys out there and we're just going to run base. It's going to be very simple because if we line up correctly, we know that our guys can be your guys.
Yeah, and I think part of it is more talented, but I also think maybe more than anything is just guys that are not burdened by kind of all of the stuff that's floating around in their head, right? Because I think Gifford and Singleton, because those are the guys I'm mostly talking about, if I'm being honest, that I've been frustrated with. I think they're plenty talented. I just think they're thinking too much, so it makes them play slow or hesitant.
I agree.
I think it's mostly just find some guys that are unburdened by that for whatever reason, obviously, and they've been here a long time. They had a couple different defensive schemes, had a couple different defensive back coaches. I get it. There's probably a lot of processing through their head, but give me, maybe just give me some young guys in there that are unburdened by that thought process that seems to slow down those guys every once in a while. I would just love to see that, especially against an offense that in the pass game probably isn't going to do anything super complex or that you're going to have to maybe check through a lot of things with. To me, this is, I think Stratton threw the ball 14 times total in his only start, the last game against Maryland, where Caleb Johnson ran it 35 times. One dude ran the ball 35 times, which I know used to be pretty common, but that's a weird thing to see now. One dude ran the ball 35 times. Like, that's going to be the game plan. Like, if they want to drop back 30 times with Stratton, like, have fun, bud. Like, you do you. But that, I think, will give them – because to me, in the run game, that's the thing that will kill you is hesitancy.
Yep.
Right? If you're not coming downhill when you need to be coming downhill, that's where those 4-yard runs turn into 8-yard runs. That's where I think some younger guys that can come downhill with bad intentions are going to be able to make a difference for Nebraska today. I'll be interested to see what the rotation looks like back there. We saw Bly Hill last week.
Mm-hmm.
We saw, I think, a little bit of Donovan Jones last week.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see maybe a little bit more of that with some of those guys in those safety spots, just to say, hey, like, if you're not going to get downhill the way we need to, we'll find somebody that will.
100%. And, I mean, you could argue that Isaac Gifford is maybe the best tackler in that defensive backfield, but the Iowa-Nebraska game or the past 4 or 5 matchups, we always picture in our head that this is a game that's predicated on basically what you said, downhill blocking, downhill running the football, mano-a-mano, defensive line versus offensive line. But the past 2 years, the biggest plays of the game have been turnovers, which are pretty much any football contest, right? Yeah. And big opportunities in the passing game. Nebraska's one passing touchdown last year was to Jalen Lloyd. 2 years ago, Casey Thompson and Trey Palmer ran up and down Kinnick Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
So if this game is going to be determined by a winner from the past outcomes, you're going to have to make a big play in the passing game at some point.
Yeah.
And on both sides, to your first point about if Nebraska can replicate what they did offensively against Wisconsin, you have to trust Nebraska's offense more to make a big passing play in the contest, any more case than what Iowa's going to be able to do at any point in this game. Even if they run the ball 35 times going into the middle fourth quarter and they try a play action pass, Nebraska's going to be ready for that moment. I don't think that there's going to be a part in this game where Nebraska's going to be caught flat-footed.
Right.
And I hope I'm not going to have to eat crow at 9:30 tonight in Iowa City.
Yeah.
I'll be in row 7 behind the Husker fans, by the way.
There we go.
Try to get the decent ticks, but
if you're looking for Austin on TV, you'll know where to find him.
You'll know how the game's going because at some point I do have volleyball school written over me, so we'll know how good the game has gone.
Yeah, no, and that's a fair point. I do trust Nebraska's offense to be able to make plays in the passing game more,
and to not make a mistake in the passing game.
Yeah, well, we hope.
Right.
Obviously in the last couple of games with Holgerson as calling plays and as the OC, it looks like a very different version of Dylan Raiola than the guy that we did see struggle with some decision-making and some turnovers kind of in the middle portion of the season. That, to me, is the really interesting part, though, was Wisconsin just what this is going to look like, or was it an aberration, right? Was it a right place, right time, home game, bowl eligibility, senior day, reeling Wisconsin team, or was it, hey, this is what a Dana Holgerson-led offense with this group of guys is capable of? I lean towards the latter. I lean towards that's what they're capable of, because this is honestly what I thought they were capable of at the start of the year. I was like, hey, they've got some nice pieces at wide receiver. They've got some multiple weapons at tight end. They've got some things that I like. Obviously, you've got Dylan Raiola. But you sit there and you go, okay, if they can do even, a decent replication of what we saw against Wisconsin, they don't have to put up 44 points. But if they can replicate that in any way, then that's what that I think is going to be a really good indicator of hopefully what you can expect from Nebraska's offense today and moving forward. The other thing that we haven't talked about a ton, and we will later, but Iowa's pass defense has gotten gashed a few times this year.
Yep.
Like, that's a place where that didn't happen at all last year. You were going to have to put together a 17-play drive to score against Iowa's defense. That hasn't been the case this year for Iowa's defense. Like, you can beat them. And that, to me, is going to be a huge difference maker for Nebraska, is especially if they can establish some things early, whether it's with Emmett Johnson or whatever it is, they're going to have their opportunity on shot plays to go out and get it against Iowa in a way that has not always been the case.
Yep.
A couple years ago, it was the case, right? Cooper DeJean was out. He was injured. He was back last year. That was actually, I think he was out last year too. But that was a much better Iowa pass defense. This year, people have been able to beat them over the top.
Yep.
That's a thing that I'm going to keep an eye on as well. Coming up next, we've got our guy Tim Verghese from Inside Nebraska. We will talk some more Iowa, Nebraska. We'll also talk a little recruiting as early signing day rapidly approaches. That's Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We will talk to our... Oh, there's a little feedback going on, Sash. We'll work on that here.
Yeah, got some spinning going around in the back.
We'll also get to our guy, Tim Verghese from Inside Nebraska here in just a minute. Meanwhile, want to tell you, make sure if you're driving anywhere like our friend Austin today, make sure you've got your seat belt buckled. It prevents injuries and saves lives, but only if worn properly. You got to make it click. I know lots of people out on the roads today, both in Nebraska and Iowa, but that's brought to you from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. We will get Tim Verghese here in just a second, but in the meantime, we were talking some comments on YouTube. Blackshirt says, yeah, the Iowa pass defense has been incredibly susceptible to the deep ball this year. That's going to be a really interesting dynamic in this game. There's only a few common opponents between Nebraska and Iowa this year. They had reasonably similar results against Wisconsin. They blew out Wisconsin. Nebraska blew out Wisconsin. They lost to Ohio State, in a much more dramatic fashion than Nebraska did. And then both teams lost to UCLA as well. Similar-ish scores, 20-17, 27-7, or 27-20. So fairly common in those things. I don't think you're going to have a ton of insight based on their common opponents here, but it is an interesting thing to look at when, especially that Wisconsin game, because I don't know what to do with Wisconsin's defense. Because, it's the same defense that held Oregon to 16 points.
I think it was just unmotivated.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of the biggest battle, is that we've seen that from a time or two, that when a defense, especially in the Big Ten Conference, gets late in the season, and sometimes their season hasn't went the way that they've wanted, they geared themselves up very highly for the Ducks. It was a home game. They jumped around. They had a good time. But then going to Lincoln, it was decent weather. You can't say that it was cold or anything like that, but you get into it, and I just don't think Wisconsin really had a good effort, a good attitude to get into it. I think Iowa and Nebraska, I think both of them will. One thing to your point, too, just about this entirety of the Iowa game, we always talk about, Iowa's going to play keep away. They're going to keep the ball away from you. They're going to have, they're going to limit your chances to be able to get into the contest if they get ahead, right?
Yeah.
Not the case so far this year, at least for the Hawkeyes. 83rd in time of possession across college football.
Yeah.
So not only they've had some moments where they've put up 40 points, yes, but it's not a team that's going to get out ahead of you and stay out in front. They're not going to pace the cart consistently in front of you and make you chase the carrot.
The way they have in years past, the way Illinois did.
Right. You're going to have chances in this contest to come back, because they will inevitably have a 3 and out. They will probably give you a turnover just because of the dynamic of where they are on a 4th-string quarterback. But other than that, it's still Iowa. They're going to find a way. Kirk Ferentz knows how this rivalry goes, and it's one of those contests that you always just look at and you're like, man, with every stat and statistic, sometimes this game just doesn't make sense.
We'll ask our next guest, Tim Verghese, about that from inside Nebraska. Tim, how are you this morning?
Hey, not too bad. How about y'all? Hope y'all had a happy Thanksgiving.
Hey, you too, man. We appreciate you joining us. I assume you're in Iowa City already?
No, I'm out in rural Nebraska, spending Thanksgiving with my girlfriend's family.
Oh,
Whoa.
there you go.
Okay, what's
All right.
rural Nebraska then? Are you in Gretna?
Aurora.
Oh, that's not rural. You just upset every single Husky fan out there.
I think
Fair.
it is more rural than Omaha. Though,
If you would have said Thetford, I would have given that to you. But Aurora is kind of tough. They've got a Runza. You can't say that that's rural.
That's fair. Okay, that's fair.
it's Nebraska. Everywhere's got a Runza.
That's fair. Good point.
Tim, we're talking a little bit of obviously Nebraska, Iowa here, so just want to jump right in. This is a very different Iowa team than the ones we've seen in the past, really across the board, offensively, defensively. Just a very unusual matchup, considering we feel like we typically know who this opponent is.
Yeah, it's what's interesting is, like, I mean, for me, it's like, I don't know if anyone, not just on the beat in general, but across the country, I don't think enough people are giving respect to Caleb Johnson and what he's done this year. Like, just because of what Ashton Genty's done this year as well. Like, if Ashton Genty doesn't exist, I think we're talking about Caleb Johnson as like a Heisman type player, because he's also doing some unprecedented things running the football. And yeah, they're very one-dimensional offensively and defensively. yeah, it's just an interesting matchup. Like I kind of don't know what to expect on that side of the ball just because of how Nebraska's recent turnaround offensively, and then what Iowa's been defensively, and some of the pieces that are going to be missing for them this week.
Mm-hmm. Tim, when it comes to a contest like this, we talked about it a little bit ago in the show, but do you expect some younger faces to make maybe some more appearances in this week's game, just for maybe how simple the Iowa offense appears to be, that it could be a moment for younger players to come in, read and react, and just play?
Yeah, I definitely think so. But also, I feel like this is the type of game defensively where you want an Isaac Gifford back there, and you want a Deshaun Singleton back there, and you want some veteran presence back there. But yeah, I could definitely see some younger pieces up front rotating in. I could see, a little more Vincent Shavers at linebacker. And yeah, like you're saying, I'd like to see at least a little bit of youth influx in the secondary. I don't know. The thing with those guys is a lot of those guys at the on the younger end in the secondary room, like they just don't have the experience against the run. Like, I don't know what they look like yet.
Yeah, Tim, as we, I think as we kind of look through that defensive secondary, which has been a little maligned in the last few weeks, and with some good reason, it seems though that most of the issues have been in miscommunication on the passing game, particularly some play action passes where maybe they get held in place for a little bit too long. As you kind of look at Iowa, what they tend to do offensively, the fact that they are on, depending on how you want to look at it, third or fourth string quarterback in Stratton, like, is it one of those things where if you're Nebraska, you just say, hey, we're going to load up against Caleb Johnson. We're going to do our best there, try and make him inefficient. And if Stratton beats us, so be it.
Yeah, that would be my strategy. Is like, again, if Stratton beats you, good for you, good for Stratton. Like I think that's the whole game plan is force Jackson Stratton to beat you. And again, I think the difference between, it's the same game plan as Wisconsin. I think the difference is Iowa's pass catchers can't win one-on-one matchups the way Wisconsin's wide receivers can. And so I think that's a bit more favorable for Nebraska's secondary, or at least the secondary that struggled recently. They should be up for this task, and if they're not, then yeah, I don't know what you have to lose by throwing in some young guys if they can't keep Jackson Stratton contained.
Tim, big picture wise for recruitment, I know you've always got your finger on the pulse of what's happening, but with the Wisconsin win, obviously getting to bowl eligibility, Matt Verol had already flipped a couple of key prospects to the Huskers before, when they were in the doom and gloom section of the season, but now they're on a winning streak, hoping to continue it. They'll get to a bowl game. Is it important that they continue winning to find success in the recruitment trail, or do you think that those two things aren't really tied to each other at this point?
I think in 2026, I think it's tied together. I think ending the season on strong note, specifically with some of the top regional guys in 2026. Hudson Parliament's a top interior line prospect who's got Iowa and Nebraska very high. Kason Thomas is a linebacker target who visited Nebraska last week, who's also going to be in Iowa today. There's a bunch of regional targets in 2026 that have both programs very high. I think a win today would go a long way for those guys, and would be an emphatic way to end the season, and help build some momentum for 2026. For 2025, last week's win and showing some offensive output today, I think is really all that's left. Like when you look at the targets that are left in 2025, it's Cortez Mills, Michael Terry, and Aiden Manitai. And Manitai at this point, it's just a matter of, does he want to come to Nebraska? Because at this point, I don't think he's going to be able to fit a visit in to try and flip from Cal. But with Mills and Terry, they've seen campus plenty, and I think just the staff's effort alone can win those recruitments here in this final stretch. So I don't think a win is necessarily important to landing Mills or Terry. And either way, win or lose, I don't think it affects your chances with flipping either of those guys or landing either of those guys.
Tim, as you mentioned, you got just a few days left here, final stretch before early signing day. I know there's a couple guys out there. You mentioned Mills, you mentioned Terry. Is there anybody else you kind of have your eye on, kind of you're keeping on the radar? I guess best case scenario for Nebraska, how many types of these guys are we talking about here?
At this point, I think we're only looking at 3 to 5 guys. There's a couple, like I could see, Nebraska's had their, they're coals in a bunch of different fires, and so is there a chance there's like a late surprise? I think so, but at this point, I think I mean, for me specifically, I've kind of hammered down to these are kind of the final 3-4 guys left on the board. The Bear Tenney decommitment was a bit of a surprise this past week, but kind of understandable depending on where Nebraska goes. Obviously, Chase Lawson's another one we're watching just as a ramification of that, but he's going to be back at Florida State this weekend, so they're trying to keep him locked in. So that's one recruitment that could go any different way. I mean, we've talked so much about him and his personality and kind of what he's looking for in his recruitment. Like, this isn't one where like that hometown, the staying home isn't like a draw the way that something new like Florida State or Texas A&M or Missouri presents was for him. So I think we've got our eyes on a handful of guys left, but yeah, I mean, you could see a surprise or two, I think, in the final stretch for sure. But I think at this point, Nebraska has most of their attention turned to the upcoming transfer portal cycle.
Tim, I'm glad you brought up Lofton and, some of these local guys that Matt Verol, when he first arrived to Nebraska, made such a deep, impactful statement saying that we've got to, close the border, make sure that people are staying in with Nebraska. If they're from here, we want them to be here. And that sort of sentiment. With the new roster changes and limits and the way that you've seen Verol's recruitment style go on the national landscape, do you think that will continue to stay the case? Obviously, you're going to try to go after the top guys, but there's a couple of guys even in the class of 2025 that maybe are going to be on that outside border of if they're going to be on the 105 in future years, that sort of thing. How do you see like future recruitment in the state going for Verol with the new roster limits?
I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to have to be some like, hey, you can't really take flyers in the state anymore because you don't want to risk burning that relationship down the road. Like, I think it's all about, I mean, they've done a really good job of being upfront and transparent with all of these recruits, whether it's in-state or out of state. But yeah, looking ahead to like 2026 and beyond, like right now in 2026, I mean, the top ranked player per Rivals in the state is Amari Jackson, and Nebraska hasn't offered. And at this point, it doesn't seem like they're going to offer because, there's something in there that they don't love, for what they look for at defensive back, or what they look for at receiver, both positions he could play. He doesn't have like, certain metrics they look for specifically in track. And so as a result, they just haven't offered and they probably aren't going to offer. And so that's one of those recruitments where in a couple of years, do we look back and will Nebraska regret it? Potentially, but at the same time, they are very process oriented, and I think that's just how it's going to be. And it's going to be a lot stricter on targets in general. You can't have these random flyer recruitments anymore where, Garrett McGuire goes out and offers such and such kid, even if it's out of state, but goes and offers such and such kid who doesn't have a whole lot of production but has some really good track time. And, Nebraska's like, okay, we see something here that no one else does. You can't really take those type of flyers anymore because of the roster limit.
We're talking with Tim Verghese from Inside Nebraska. Tim, just kind of have a random hodgepodge of questions here for you, so don't try and find any rhyme or reason to them. The first one I'm thinking about here is what from the Wisconsin game in the game plan and offensively specifically do you think is replicable against this Iowa team?
I think what they did was they presented a lot of the same concepts out of different looks, and a lot of the motion they threw in there had some open looks that Dylan didn't necessarily take that I could see them taking this time around. One that comes back to mind for me, that late wheel route to Ramir Johnson is a yo-yo motion to January Bonner on the other side, who's wide open on his own wheel route on the other side of the field. I think Dana Holgerson's done a really good job of giving Nebraska multiple open targets on routes and simplifying things for Dylan where his reads are easier and simpler. I think between that and I think the run game as well, I think they've started to, it happened a couple of weeks ago, but I think slowly but surely they've really started to find what works for them with this line, with the backs they have in the run game. And I think that those are things that are replicable even against a better defense, and this is also a defense I would keep in mind as well. It's a defense that kind of lives out of zone and pass coverage, and Dylan has had more trouble against man than zone, and zone's something he can pick apart. And Iowa, they do a good job of disguising and doing certain things, but for the most part, they play out of relatively simple shells and play relatively simple quarters coverage that Dylan's used to because he faces that in practice.
All right, next random, not so random one for me is, what do you think is replicable from the running game? Do you think we see kind of another usage of Emmett Johnson the same way, either in the run and passing game, or you think maybe that formula of, hey, Emmett Johnson early, Dante Dowdell late, is that something you think we might see again?
I think because of the weather, I think there's a chance we see Emmett early, Dante late. But I also think, Emmett last week kind of showed he can carry the load. You know, he hasn't had, that type of opportunity this season to kind of get into that type of rhythm and build his legs up over the course of the game, and really start to take advantage of, Nebraska's offensive line starting to lean on guys as the game goes on. I think that, and I think those two back sets, I think you're going to see a lot more of, because against a more sound run defense like Iowa is, you have to create numbers advantages. And the cool thing about having multiple backs back there on either side of the quarterback is it forces both sides of the line to account for, hey, either of these guys could be getting the handoff. This ball could be going anywhere. You can't really key in on where that ball is going. And so I think you're going to see a lot more of that. They really started to build out an offense kind of out of those two back sets. I'm really curious to see what other looks we get out of that, because there's so much more they could be doing with that, and I'm curious to see what Dana's built into that.
All right, and then last one for me, speaking of Dana, is, well, last one in my random line of questioning. We're not going to let you go yet. Speaking of Dana, if you're a betting man, is Dana Holgorsen the offensive coordinator at Nebraska in 2025?
I think so. I think things are trending in that direction. I think he's having fun. I think, he kind of recognizes the talent he has, a quarterback, the talent that type of quarterback attracts. He's got enough relationships where he can attract some talent of his own, and is still familiar enough. He hasn't been out of the game long enough that some of those bridges are burnt. But I think I'm leaning towards Dana sticking around as we speak, just from what we've heard over these past couple of days.
Tim, looking at the extended career of some of the seniors or maybe guys potentially moving on from the Husker program after today's contest or the bowl game. I asked this on Tuesday when I was here for the show, but this feels like a game for Ty Robinson that he could really impact maybe his potential draft stock. Do you see it the same way, or is this a contest that maybe he needs to continue to build something else into a bowl game and then really peak when he gets into the Senior Bowl and so on and so forth?
I mean, for him, the thing with him is, like, I don't think he thinks in that way of, like, oh, I need to save myself for the bowl game or, like we saw against Wisconsin. I mean, he at this point, he's a guy that is just going to throw himself at offensive linemen and dare them to try and stop him, And, I think a good performance today could go a long way for him, because he's had a nice little run of games here recently, but I think he's had a very good season. I've said this, I think he's one of the better interior defensive linemen in the country in college football this season. He's played that way this year. I think he's going to be a handful for Iowa. I have no doubt this week that in Iowa meeting rooms, the offensive line was keying in on number 9.
So, he mentioned in his press conference earlier this week that he was excited to be in that jumbo rhino package or whatever you wanted to call it. If you had to put a bet on it, do you think that there's a chance he gets a carry today, or is he going to get a carry in the bowl game? Because it sounds like he's excited about the opportunity to get one.
I hadn't thought about that, but you know what? I could see a carry today on the goal line.
Okay.
I think that would be a nice way for Ty Robinson to end his Nebraska career in front of a majority of Nebraska fans in like a type of a rivalry that he obviously cares about deeply.
Tim, more likely that Ty Robinson gets a carry or that we see him run the option like Penei Sewell?
I think we see a carry. Oh man, it'll be fun to see though. I'm sure they would do it at some point. One I'd like to see down the line. I mean, Keona Davis has some wheels to him. I'd like to see him try.
I'm okay.
I love the hypothetical we're spinning right now, where it's just 4 defensive linemen in the backfield, and we're just running a triple option.
Yeah,
sounds fun.
Why not?
We're gonna have a full house backfield, only defensive linemen, including at the quarterback spot. I love
hope
it.
Dana's listening and taking notes.
Yeah,
he probably is. You're preaching to the choir. I'm low-key like a little obsessed with Keona Davis. Like the way that guy moves, every time he gets on the field, I'm just like, oh, there he is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the Leonardo DiCaprio meme where I'm pointing at the TV screen. I think there's a lot of guys in that room, whether it's the defensive backs room or Kai Wall and Keona Davis, whatever those guys, Riley Van Poppel, who we might see a little bit today. Like, Are there any guys you think we might see today coming off of either like their last game of the 4-game red shirt, or that we haven't necessarily seen that you're particularly excited about?
Van Poppel in particular, I think he's one I think we're going to see a good bit today. Feels like they've been saving him for this game. And me and Steve kind of talked about it last week. Kind of felt like him not getting in the Wisconsin game kind of bodes well for, okay, let's get him out there in this Iowa game, a game they see is winnable. And I'm curious to see what he does if he does get action today. He's one I'm excited to see. I mean, we've seen him, but like I think this could be a good day for the edge rushers. I think Willis McGahee, and James Williams in particular. James Williams had a quiet couple of weeks. He's gotten close, but hasn't been able to necessarily, finish some of these sack opportunities. But I think this could be a good day for those guys, just because, again, if you force Jackson to pass, I think Terrence Knighton's going to take any advantage to send his guys and let them pin their ears back.
Tim, if we're talking about guys who have been on the back of a milk carton the past couple of weeks, it feels like we've been wondering where Carter Nelson fits into Dana Holgerson's offense. Is this a week that we could see maybe more of him, or is it going to take some time to get him more integrated into what Holgerson wants to do?
I think the fact that we saw Carter out there running routes as much as he did last week, I think bodes well for what his usage could be this week. I think last week was that, okay, you've gotten the playbook. Let's see how you do out there running some of these routes. I think this week you start to give him a little more touches because he is another guy that gives you some one-on-one wins, and this is going to be a big opportunity for Isaiah Nayer and Jamal Banks to kind of keep improving their own draft stock and try and figure out where they belong at the next level. But I do think this is a game where I think there's going to be plenty of obviously Barney influence in the offensive game plan today, but I do think we see a little more Carter Nelson too, just because at the end of the day too, you want to end Carter's freshman season on a high note as well. And I think this is a good opportunity to do that because he'll have some favorable matchups in coverage.
That's Tim Verghese from Inside Nebraska. Tim, real quick before we let you go, how do you think this one goes?
I see Nebraska winning. I think Nebraska pulls this off. I think that the offensive momentum they have carrying into this, the weather is going to be cold, but I think it bodes well that, everything should relatively be clear. I think they'll be able to throw the ball a little bit. I think quiet as it's kept. I think though he's been used less, Emmett has similar ability to Caleb Johnson, and I think if Nebraska's defense can key in on Caleb and keep him contained, Nebraska's offense has an opportunity to pull away and help Nebraska's defense out and get them into positions where they have to basically just pressure Jackson Stratton and dare him to beat him with his arm.
That's our guy, Tim Verghese from Inside Nebraska. Tim, enjoy Aurora, and we will talk to you again soon.
Yes, sir. Talk soon.
We will be back. More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We'll be right back in 5 minutes. We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill on the Pillar exterior stage. We'll be joined by our friend Laura Kuhn, the head coach at the Omaha Supernovas, in just a minute. But before that, I want to tell you about my friends over at Midlands Family Urgent Care. They have a lot more to offer than you might think from an urgent care facility. I've been going there for months now to help me out with my weight loss. After an initial consultation, they were able to prescribe me semaglutide, the same active ingredient as Ozempic, and now I'm down about 30 pounds overall. Best part is, don't have the constant food cravings anymore. I'm not always thinking about food. My portion control is so much better, and it's not just a constant food noise in my head anymore. It's been a total game changer for me. If you need a little help losing weight as well, make sure you check out Midlands Family Urgent Care. You can book an appointment by calling their Millard Clinic, 402-810-9494, or book online at midlandsurgentcare.com. They have been great over there. Really appreciate them and all their support. We are joined now by head coach Laura Bird Kuhn from the Omaha Supernovas. The Supernovas just had their draft here just a few days ago.
6 people in that class.
Hanging out here at a Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. Coach, how are you this morning? Coach Kuhn, how are you?
Hi there. Good. How are you doing?
Oh, we're doing great here. It's getting exciting. I know your season's rapidly approaching, but We got to talk a little draft here first. You guys had a little draft party on Monday.
Yeah, there was a lot of action kicking off this Thanksgiving week. I feel like that was so long ago now.
I know it does feel, it's Thanksgiving week is like a little time vortex. It's kind of like being in an airport where time is meaningless. But it does feel like the draft was like 3 weeks ago. We're in the same week that the draft happened. I feel like I've had 2 weekends since then.
Correct. That's a great analogy. An airport time warp. That's amazing.
So, Coach, obviously you have some local connections with your draft here. How important is it to you? Not only, obviously, you're trying to get the best players, but I know how community focused you guys are as well. How important is it for you to connect with the community with your players and not just try and build? I mean, you want to get the best players, obviously, but there's kind of a balance there, right?
There's definitely a balance, but the good thing is a lot of the best players come from the Nebraska area.
It does help. It does help.
It works out. Yeah, that does help our the cause, but it is huge for us. I mean, you mentioned the after party. So we had the draft Monday, kind of late morning, early afternoon, but our after party was so cool. And we got to have Lindsey Krause and Kendra Waite stop by that night. And it was so fun to see the community, just the excitement, but like they instantly just accepted them. I mean, it felt like Thanksgiving. I mean, our whole, when we do events and we get to hang out and interact with our fans, it's always fun. And I think that's what is so cool. I talked to a couple fans and families that night from our first match. From our first match, it felt that way. So now it's just special as we keep growing and continue to build. And obviously the teams are going to change, to see that, but to see not only with our team and inside our team, the players connect and meet each other and then gel together, but now with our community, it's the same concept, really.
Coach, you have to feel like at the local level, a lot of people have to be pretty excited about what the Supernovas brought in. But do you feel like you got a real steal in the 5th round, getting Kendra Waite out of Creighton? I mean, that has to feel like just slipped through the cracks and just happened to be right there for you.
Oh my gosh, yes. It makes me smile just thinking about it because she's such a great player, but she's even more like a better human. Like all of them, all of these players are just great people. But I've known Kendra also. She was a little sister to one of my players from Kansas. So I've known that family. I recruited her in college. And so many levels of like for the community, for what she's done at Creighton now. I mean, it's just awesome. It's so full circle for her and for myself. But even now our Supernovas, like it's such a cool, our volleyball community on top of just being in Omaha. It's just a special time for our sport, a special time for this place.
Coach, you mentioned your Kansas connection. You had another one with your first overall pick, and I'm going to pray I'm saying this right, Toyosi Anabanjo.
Did you like how I avoided that one?
Yeah.
I went with Kendra Waite trying to go with the start there.
I appreciate, you leaving me that one. Coach, how did that one come about with Toyosi trying to get that with that first pick that you guys had?
Well, I've been obviously in Kansas gym watching them. I've watched them for years, but she is a great person too. Like we needed M1. We knew we needed an M1, so we were building that list. And we had 3 to 4 top players that we wanted. But she's going to fit in this role, and her joining the team as a rookie, but her personality. And you could see it in her interview. Oh my gosh, that was so fun that night. She did a live interview with our live draft party, and it was so engaging because it's just her personality. But you said her name great. Also, I'm just going to give you guys a heads up. You can call her Toy. Just say Toy.
Oh, perfect. Whew,
thank God.
That helps.
You said her name perfectly. You actually pronounced it. And we joked about it when I was there because a bunch of the families, we were all hanging out. If you just think of a banjo, it's on a banjo.
Perfect.
Banjo. That's how you say her name.
It's spelled just like that.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't get that often.
You crushed it. Yeah, you crushed it.
Yeah, PA in Omaha is going to celebrate hearing that one. They are very excited about that.
We're talking with Coach Kuhn, head coach of the Omaha Supernovas. Coach, obviously you've got this a lot of your championship roster coming back from last year. How important was it for you to get players that had this winning history with whatever college programs they were at to help kind of keep those championship vibes going in Omaha?
as coaches and even as athletes, when you're playing the sport, there's always the process and there's the ability to have this intrinsic force. Like you just want to win, you want to train, you want to be the best. And you hit it on the head. Like you want players that have come through programs and have played at that level. And so that is something we look at. It's not always numbers, like, yes, you want to make sure they're a solid player, consistent and all that. But sometimes it's even the programs they're coming from, and knowing some of the coaches and being around the sport so long, that is part of it. Like you want to get the kids that are going to grind and the kids that are going to be just gym rats, because that's honestly what it's going to take, because we have new pieces. So we need to be able to find that competitive chemistry again and, get them to gel this first couple weeks of training.
I know we talked about bringing in Kendra, kind of the local talent from Creighton, but obviously getting Allie and Lindsay in back-to-back picks for the Supernovas. Was there any evaluation after you pick Allie Batenhorst to then maybe go back to her teammate with Lindsay? Was there any rationale in picking Lindsay in that spot just because you had already gotten Allie?
Well, the whole dynamic of our picks had changed. So the night before we did all of our lists and what we necessarily needed first, and it all kind of flipped as the draft, as it's happening live and people start taking players in certain positions. I mean, we honestly, that whole order kind of changed for us live, like as these picks were happening and obviously with other things going on behind the scenes. But, yeah, I mean, we talked about it on the spot. Obviously, those two picks were not as quick as the 8 and 10 pick, that back-to-back. But we also knew we needed pins. And they're both very versatile, and they can play on both if we needed them to. So that was huge. So I actually think it was kind of cool to be able to pick them that close together.
Coach, we'll get you out of here on this. What was your favorite thing that you ate yesterday for Thanksgiving?
Ooh.
The favorite thing that I ate? There's always the traditional things, the turkey, the potatoes, the sweet potatoes. I'm going to have to say, I think it was the sweet potatoes. It's right between the sweet potatoes and the green bean casserole. Those two things were very good.
Are you just traditional sweet potatoes? You going sweet potato pie too?
We just had traditional sweet potatoes. Now, this morning with coffee, we are having pumpkin squares.
Ooh.
So part of our dessert is rolling over into today, which I love.
Well, an extended Thanksgiving.
Honestly, that's the best part of Thanksgiving is the leftovers, right, Coach?
Yes, the leftovers are where it's at.
Coach, we appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll be talking to you a bunch throughout the season. Congrats on a great draft week, and I hope you enjoyed your holiday.
Yes, you guys too. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Coach.
Coach Laura Bird Kuhn from the Omaha Supernovas. We will, of course, be catching up with the Supernovas all throughout the year. Appreciate Coach joining us the day after Thanksgiving here, but really excited for their roster that they put together. Obviously, we mentioned a bunch of the local flavor between Kendra Waite, Allie Batenhorst, Lindsay Krause. It's going to be a lot of fun to see that team put together this year.
Yeah, and it was cool. I was listening to the post-draft conversation with Allie and our very own Anna Bellinghausen, and just hearing their conversation about how excited Batenhorst was to come back to Nebraska.
Yep.
And she said specifically to come back to Omaha. I think that means a lot, especially to probably what the Supernovas were looking for, especially when you look to year 2 and repeating if you're trying to build the best roster to do so.
Absolutely. That's Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi. Lulla. We'll be back. More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and it's time to hit the road with MH Hospitality. MH Hospitality, stay once and carry memories forever. Make sure you get to mhhospitality.net to check out all of their properties and what they've got to offer. You can, you know, it's the holiday season. Make sure you get a nice place for your relatives to stay, because Lord knows you don't want them staying in your house. All right. That's what MH Hospitality is for. They've got you covered. Go check out mhhospitality.net. Austin, we've got some really interesting road matchups this weekend with some high profile games where road teams are favored.
That's right. And I know where you want to start too.
Boise.
No, Ball State at Ohio. Isn't that?
Hey, it's a border war.
Ball State University, baby. Come on now.
No, there's obviously Nebraska's on the road. We'll get to that one in a little bit as well, although they are not favored. You've got Tennessee on the road at Vanderbilt, which, you know, in-state battle there. DB and I are not sure if Tennessee's good at football.
This will be a decent test to figure it out, because
Vanderbilt's
going to give you two versions of themselves, either the absolute worst version where Diego Pava just decides to go all over the yard and have no idea what's happening, or they will throw the ball all over the yard and will destroy you. And I don't know which side of Vanderbilt we're going to see, but I'm with you that this is a contest that I think a lot of people should have their eyes on, because the College Football Playoff Committee is going to have their eyes on this, because this is the start of the SEC final slate of how many teams they can get in. And Tennessee is right on that border of either falling completely out or just barely getting by.
100%. They're an 11-point favorite at Vanderbilt. That one's one I'm definitely keeping an eye on. Another team that's on the road and kind of in that SEC no man's land is South Carolina. They're not a favorite today. They're a 3-point underdog in another in-state rivalry with Clemson, but that's another super important game for the SEC. We're in, and I don't know how much people pay attention to the in-season playoff rankings. I don't give them a ton of thought because so much can change, but we are looking at a place right now where the SEC would only have 3 teams in. At the start of the year, I think everyone assumed it was a given, especially the fact that they only play the 8 conference games, that the SEC would get 4 in, but chaos has ensued, which we love. And you're looking at an opportunity, especially if teams like South Carolina, teams like Tennessee aren't able to continue winning. You might end up with a 3-bid SEC, which would just, I think, warm all the hearts of every Big Ten fan in the Midwest right now.
Of all the SEC teams, I think South Carolina might actually be one of the better teams in the conference.
They're playing super well.
If they hadn't had the officials have some utterly blown calls in the LSU contest, they could be top 10 right now.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they'd be in the same spot. They'd basically be in the same spot as Tennessee right now.
Yes. The unfortunate part with the SEC and the way that the rankings have gone is the benefit of being ranked earlier in the season helps you later
100%.
in the year.
100%.
Alabama's such a great case for that.
Yeah, they haven't been good this year.
Yeah, they have not been good. And they continue to stay in the top 12 conversation despite having 3 losses.
Because they started out number 3 or whatever they started out.
And obviously the Alabama brand is going to continue on for a little bit. Same with Clemson. Yeah. I would actually argue, and I know that they're not a favorite, but I feel much more confident in South Carolina's ability to win that
on the
game
road
against Clemson than if it were the opposite. And I know Clemson's a higher ranked team, but if you flip the field, I'm not sure that Clemson really stands a chance against South Carolina in that I don't even know what it's called. I just lost it. Do they even?
It's the.
They call something, right?
Yeah, it's the Magnolia State rivalry. Something.
This is going to be bad. That's a bad look for us.
We can Google it. We don't live in South Carolina. It's fine.
Yeah, come on.
I think they call it the Magnolia State. That might not be what they call the game, but I'm pretty sure that's what South
something
Carolina.
Like that. No, I'm confusing it because you're in Death Valley, one of the 5 of them that's across college football. But yes you're in Death Valley tonight. But again, I still don't think that South Carolina should be as heavily an underdog as they are listed. It feels like this is a much closer game. I don't think Clemson's as good as what people want them to be.
Yeah, I think South Carolina's playing right now better than Clemson, so that'll be good here to see how that one plays out.
And when was the last time Clemson played a team that was as good as South Carolina? It's been a while on their schedule, right?
Yeah, Clemson hasn't had. I mean, they played Georgia to start the year, but after that, it's been it's been fairly easy pickings for them. NC State's not good. Florida State's not good.
Yeah, they played the dominant Citadel program that everyone knows.
Louisville's okay. Louisville might be in the neighborhood of South Carolina, but
they lost to Louisville.
And they lost. And they lost to Louisville.
I don't know. You go through the ACC schedule of Clemson, and I don't see a dominant program that should be a top 12 team here. I mean, you got blown out by Georgia in the opener, like you said. You have a 16-point win against Florida State, which, as you know, I mean, is 16 points really that great against Florida State? Probably should have won by multiple.
No, Florida State's hot garbage.
A 10-point win at Virginia Tech, a 4-point win over Pittsburgh, which has been okay this year. And then you blew out Citadel, and everyone goes, yep, Clemson, number 12 in the country. Go for it. That makes no sense to me. I think South Carolina has a very, very good chance tomorrow to be able to really open up their playoff case.
Here's one that doesn't make a ton of sense to me in terms of what the number is, and that's Illinois as a road favorite. Only -7 over a pretty bad Northwestern team. I don't totally understand that one. It stinks a little bit to me. And that number's come down a little bit. It was -7.5 as recently as yesterday.
Got to defend the lake.
Yeah, they're like in their tiny baby stadium. There's
It's such a shame Nebraska didn't get a road game at Northwestern this year.
They would have made the stands collapse. Yes. I mean, it's probably for the best. We would have had a disaster on our hands. No, Illinois, I'm surprised Illinois is only a 7-point favorite at Northwestern. Northwestern not very good. Illinois, I do think, is good. Yeah. Altmaier has been playing really well. He's kind of flown under the radar, but his numbers are incredible this year. Hasn't turned the ball over. A huge step up from where he was last year. Obviously, you got Patrick Bryant, who's a great receiver, had that touchdown last week to seal the fate of Rutgers. I think Illinois should be a bigger favorite than 7 points here against Northwestern. So that one smells a little to me. But that's one, again, I don't know how much them being on the road is factoring in here, considering Northwestern, not exactly a home field advantage, unless the advantage is just like, hey, nobody's going to be watching you and it's awkward.
Well, Illinois fans travel so well too, so it's probably actually just a neutral site game at this point.
I mean, it is a long trip up from Champaign to Evanston. I mean, it's probably about 2 hours. I've made that
too far. No,
I've made that drive a few times.
I wanted to ask you about this just to go back to SEC ball.
Yeah,
are you going to even consider Georgia Tech at Georgia?
I don't think so, but Georgia Tech is pretty good.
I think they're salty enough to stay in it.
I don't
know if they're good enough to win, but I think they can stay in.
I think they'll stay in it. 18.5 felt a little heavy to me.
Yes.
Like I thought this is, and not a ton, I thought this is a 2-touchdown game, not probably 18.5 or more.
I thought 13.5 would be better.
Yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood. Georgia Tech is a little spicy, and I don't trust Georgia.
Yes.
Like I just don't trust Georgia at this point. Carson Beck has obviously had a ton of turnover issues as of late. Like I don't know. I don't trust them. And so I don't feel great about them.
But Georgia's dominated that series too. I think that's the other part.
I'm not worried about Georgia Tech winning.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
But I don't know if it's going to be by the margin that Vegas tends to think it
I also don't doubt that there will be a point sometime tonight that the score will flash on your phone and just be close game alert, like entering the fourth.
Yeah,
it'll be like 24-17.
Yeah.
Georgia Tech has the ball, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. And the game ends like 41-20.
Yeah, it gets out of hand late on them.
Right.
I could definitely see that happening. Another road favorite that I am interested in is a team I think is actually very good. That's Notre Dame. They're a 7.5-point favorite on the road tomorrow afternoon against USC. That is a Notre Dame team that I've been super impressed with, especially as of late. I know they've got that bizarre Northern Illinois loss. That was a long time ago at this point. Notre Dame, on a week-in, week-out basis, might be one of the most consistent teams in the country. I have probably fewer questions about Notre Dame on any given week than I do any other top team in the country. That feels like one where I feel pretty good about the road team.
And maybe the most balanced roster across college football. I don't know if they have superb standouts. I don't know if you could pick one person off of Notre Dame's team and be like, that's one of the best players in college football at their position. But overall, their roster is just phenomenally above average, right across the line at all positions. And you have to feel good about that going to USC too. But a Lincoln Riley legacy game, I feel like, could be cooking. And you do wonder that when, the vultures are circling around that program and, there's a lot of conversation and talk, they've gotten to their bowl game, but that's never the standard there. How do you get them off your back? You beat your number one rival and you try to, salvage the season on the last week before you go into your postseason bid.
I really don't know what to do with Lincoln Riley because I think I genuinely think he might end up being way more Cliff Kingsbury than we would have thought from his time in Oklahoma, where it's just, hey, this guy just needs to be an NFL offensive coordinator and just leave him alone after that. Just let him go do his thing. Let him go design incredible offenses and just leave him alone. Because I don't know. It certainly doesn't seem like he's cut out for the Big Ten. It didn't seem like he thought he was cut out for the SEC getting out of Dodge.
Didn't want to be there anyway.
Maybe I feel like he's either going to be a lifelong Big 12 coach or he's going to end up being an offensive coordinator in the NFL forever.
Yeah.
For a guy that I know what his winning percentage is, I know what the record is. For a guy that's been that successful, I do kind of look at him like, I don't know if this is for him, which is really strange to think about. Maybe he ends up just being the best Group of 5 coach in the country for all time, because it seems like there's a little bit of that, like, hey, I'm not here for all the other stuff. I just want to coach ball. Like, there's almost a little young Dana Holgorsen in him where he's just like, hey, I just want to score 1 million points and I don't care about anything else.
Right.
And everybody else can worry about all this other stuff. And that's not the job of a head coach anymore. It's just not, especially at a program like USC. We saw it here with Scott Frost, who was obviously less successful in previous stops than Lincoln Riley was. But I think there's some guys out there that just want to coach their side of the ball and be happy and not have to worry about being a CEO. A lot of football coaches don't make good CEOs. That's
true.
Kind of what we learned.
Yep. Big 12 you mentioned just a minute ago. I love this. I already put it in. I picked it.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Arizona over Arizona State.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
Arizona
I like
State
it too much.
is a road favorite. Arizona at home. We'll see how that one goes. hitting the road with MH Hospitality. Stay once, create memories forever. Make sure you check out mhhospitality.net. Coming up next, we're going to talk to our friend Damon Benning here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. That's Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill on the Pillar Exterior stage. We're going to talk to my normal co-host, Damon Benning, here in just a second. But before that, I'm sure there's a lot of you maybe cooped up in your house. You got family around still.
You're secretly listening to
You
Hurrdat
know,
Sports Radio
yeah,
on your phone.
which it seems like a lot of you based on our stream numbers this morning. I think there's a lot of you out there having this issue. Once the show's over, go check out our friends over at Foaling Warehouse Omaha. It's like bowling, but with a football. It's incredible. DB and I went over there the other day. It's a ton of fun. It's a huge space. They've got open play. Go over to foalingomaha.com to check out their holiday hours. They're open today, tomorrow, Sunday, as long as your family's in town this weekend, and you can reserve lanes online as well. It's a great experience. They've got 2 full bars, and you can bring your own food in as well. It's a great time. Go check out foalingomaha.com, again, for holiday hours and for a chance to reserve a lane. It's the perfect spot to just get out of the house, get some activities going a little bit with the family. I know we used to always go see movies.
Yeah, that was our big thing too.
You know, we'd either go to a movie or on either Christmas. We used to go on Christmas or Thanksgiving. Then a lot of people started to do that, and it became like a very crowded, kind of overwhelming experience. And we're like, maybe we don't do that anymore. Maybe I got some family up here from Texas. Maybe we have to go check out Foaling Omaha. It'd be a good time there.
And you get to burn off some calories too.
100%.
While you hopefully consume a little bit more. But,
yes, you burn off the solid calories from yesterday. You drink some liquid calories from the bar over there. It's called balance, right? You got a little bit of both there.
Well, and if you are celebrating, Husker fandom today, calories don't count over this 24-hour period.
It's true. Yeah. They've got TVs everywhere. They got a little VIP section that you can rent out as well. You want to have a little family party over there. So I'm sure you'll be able to watch the Husker game there as well. So make sure you go check them out. It's a ton of fun over there. We are efforting DB. He has a lot of responsibilities with the Husker Radio Network today. So hopefully we'll be able to catch up with him. If not, though, I do have some additional keys to the game for Iowa, Austin, that I'm interested to see if Nebraska is able to get going. First and foremost for me, I'm gonna go with Emmett Johnson.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not saying he has to have 200 yards of total offense again, but Nebraska needs to make Emmett Johnson a impactful factor in this game once again, because we talked about a couple things earlier with Tim Verghese and before we talked to him about some of the vulnerabilities that Iowa has as a defense. One of them is they can get beat over the top. They've been susceptible to big passing plays over the course of the season, but the best way to set that up is if you can establish Emmett Johnson in the run. That way the play action pass is that much more impactful. You can hold those safeties in place for a minute and let some of the guys get over top. That's going to be huge, I think, for Nebraska, is to get Emmett Johnson going again.
Is Emmett going to get the start today?
I hope so.
I have been just shocked.
He's earned it.
The past couple of weeks. Dante Dadell obviously had 3 touchdowns, and that's not nothing to write off about. Like, I don't want to discredit the ability.
He also
to
had a great game.
Yes.
Yeah.
But EJ's ability to go up and down the field inside of the 20 set up Nebraska for all sorts of success throughout that contest against Wisconsin. And I completely agree with you. It does not need to be the Saquon Barkley storyline again, but man, it would be great to get another Emmett Johnson big day.
100%.
And when was the last time Nebraska had back-to-back good running games from their running back?
100-yard rushers, maybe back-to-back game?
Right? Like, it had to have been a long time
2016,
ago.
2017, somewhere in there. About as long as the bowl drought, probably.
Yeah.
If we're being honest.
Maybe that's what they needed to do all those weeks. Just find a 100-yard rusher. That's all that they needed to do. Jeez.
Oh, it's that easy.
If it was that simple, we would have just done that, man.
But yeah, I hope we see another edition of Emmett Johnson.
Do you think his impact in the passing game could be more important today than him between the tackles?
Yeah, it certainly could be, especially if I was loading up against the run game. That's the thing. When Dana Holgorsen got hired, that's one of the things I first said was Nebraska fans need to get comfortable with the idea, even though he's not a true air raid guy anymore, right? They need to get comfortable with the idea of some alternative things kind of taking place of a traditional running game, whether it's these short little pop passes to Ja'Cory Barney, whether it's kind of the screen check down game to Emmett Johnson, like we saw last week a couple times, where it wasn't even designed to him. He just kind of floats in front of Dylan Raiola to make sure he's knows he's available and he's got an option there. Those those things are just as important, maybe more important in what Emmett Johnson can bring to the table for Nebraska than even traditional running game. Obviously, if you can just line it up and run it down people's throats, you're going to win more often than not, right? But Iowa's defense, especially run defense, is still pretty good. You're going to have, I think, a hard time doing that consistently. So a lot of those other things come into play to not only open that up, but open everything else up for Nebraska as well. Although I will say, maybe one of the things I'm most interested in is Nebraska kind of blew up Wisconsin's front seven last week. There were some enormous running lanes for Emmett Johnson, and
outside blocking was huge.
They did a really good job on outside blocking as well. Borkature was great. Jamal Banks, who has been frankly very bad at this all season, had a great game blocking on the perimeter. He had almost a Chancellor Brewington level coming on that crackdown on the goal line on one of the Dante Dowdell touchdowns. So that's a thing I'm going to be looking at as well, is can the offensive line, can the perimeter blocking replicate that part of what we saw against Wisconsin? Because it's easy to look at the Dylan Raiola numbers and be like, oh man, that's great. But if the offensive line can play like that again, which was honestly probably the best performance we've seen from a Nebraska offensive line in I don't know how many years, certainly the best one this year, but you're going to be going back a few years to find one that's been as good as the one against Wisconsin. If they can replicate that, everything else will look better.
Yeah, this is an unreal opportunity for Nebraska through 11 weeks of their season so far, 11 games of narratives, of different opportunities that people have had to chirp and chip at the team to right the wrongs from all of those past weeks. The most important keys of this contest, if you want to establish a good running game, is perimeter blocking. So, yes, your receivers are going to need to block well in this contest.
Yeah.
You're going to need to be creative offensively because no team scouts Nebraska better than the Iowa defense over these past 5-10 years, right? And on the defensive side, too, you have to play physical and you have to tackle well. And I think all of these narratives that the fan base, that media, that everybody has been able to look at Nebraska in a vacuum and say, these are the biggest things that Nebraska has to improve upon. It's a great chance right now for Nebraska to be able to say, listen, we got them corrected. We're on the right path, and we got better as the season went on.
100%. Joining us now is my good friend DB. Damon, what's going on, buddy?
I'm just trying to make it. How about you guys?
Oh, we're doing all right.
Yeah, DB, can't complain. Thanks for letting me be in your chair today. You keep it nice and cushiony right here. I do appreciate that. But I think we have to.
I like the little, when you kind of sit down.
We do. I think I have to get back on the right foot with you. I apologize for putting an unflattering photo of you up on the X app on Monday night. So
it was fantastic just to have people, make fun of me. It was great.
I just saw
little did I know it was going to be a precursor too. So it's all good.
The best comments I saw in there was someone had put on there that he looks really excited to get the game started. Those are some of my favorite ones. I knew you were amped up. You were locked in. You were good. But
I was, but I told Ravi yesterday on the show, and I saw the comments in the YouTube stream, and you posted, you're like, you weren't going to stand for the slander. I was going to do it personally, and then I was like, nah, radio's good.
Well, I'm listening either way, so it's all good. It's all good.
Right,
I'm glad we got that past us. We're all on the same train now.
The slander train, all aboard.
DB, before we get into Nebraska, speaking of guys that were on the slander train, as you're watching in real time that Chicago Bears game play out, like what's going through your head?
So I thought it was kind of. So real time, I just kept saying, "Are you serious?" I'm like, what? Okay, 19, 18. What did he do with his helmet? Is it because he can't hear? Like, what was with the waving of the hands? And then just really casual. Now it's like, oh my gosh, they're not gonna get another playoff. So the ball is in the air.
Yeah.
And I'm like looking at the clock. I'm like, is that going to hit the ground? How are they going to stop the clock? So, but the craziest thing of it all was just when they panned the camera to Eberflus, and he's just like looking up. I'm like, oh boy, I don't know if they're going to let you go back to Chicago. Like I was worried how he was going to get back. That was incredible.
Yeah, that was an unbelievable.
My favorite was when he said, I like what we did there.
Yeah, dude, I was going to say, I know you're a press conference guy. The doubling down in the press conference where he's like, I think we did the right thing. It's like, I think you may not be qualified for this job. Did you lie on the resume? Like, what happened here?
So I wanted to know, like, was he trying not to throw someone under the bus? Because I didn't get the answer, because it wasn't really, I mean, maybe Caleb should have called a timeout, but I mean, that's totally on him. So I don't know who likes what they did there. That's what I want. Like, who?
Yeah.
I mean, the Lions, I think, like what they did there.
The Lions arguably are probably the most happy about the entire situation.
Did you hear Tim Patrick?
No.
Like, oh yeah. He's like, well, they had a timeout. We're like, don't they have a timeout? Yeah, that's tough.
Well, unfortunately, those timeouts don't carry into this Iowa-Nebraska contest, DB. But I was just talking about before we got you on the phone about how this feels like a great opportunity for Nebraska to flip the narrative from the past 11 weeks of the season and really showcase how much they've improved, not only in the past few weeks, but just over the course of the season. Do you see it the same way? And maybe which part of those improvements do you think are the biggest factors today?
Yeah, I think number one, I think they're in a good frame of, like, their mind is right. You know, seeing them on the plane and seeing them this morning a little bit, already milling around. Talked to James Williams last night. I think they feel like this is an opportunity, and that's how they're looking at it. It certainly isn't we got one. You know, we were chasing 6. Now we're good. You know, it's something where it's Iowa, and they will be ready to go. I actually like, and I kind of went back and forth with this in my head, Austin. I actually like a little bit of a short week because the emotional turnaround is a little quicker. You had to kind of dial in. Yesterday was disjointed. They got the early workout in, then they kind of ate as a team. They pushed back the flight time. So I think they're zeroed in on the opponent, and 7-5 potentially with a chance to go to the bowl game and position yourself for 8. You feel a lot closer to your goals than you did at 5-5 with all the questions swirling heading into Wisconsin.
DB, I've got a running back question for you. I know you're a big Caleb Johnson guy. You have been all year. You were before the year. You've been beating that drum longer than anybody. The one thing that I've noticed going through Iowa's games, going through Caleb Johnson's games, is there is a pretty strong correlation between him getting 20 carries and them winning football games, and him not getting 20 carries and them not winning football games. This isn't like trying to keep a ball out of a post player's hands. Not that I've got PTSD from Creighton right now or anything, or keeping a ball out of a shooter's hands where you can face guard him or something. Like, how do you keep the ball out of Caleb Johnson's hands?
Yeah, so I think it's, ball control is the easy answer, but that's not really what I think it boils down to. I mean, Nebraska's going to do what they do on offense. Mm-hmm. And they're gonna try to play with a little tempo. They want to get in a rhythm. They're gonna do what they do. So it's not necessarily ball control. What it is you have to get them behind the sticks, and even that's no guarantee. But I mean, you need a lot of 2nd and 8s and 3rd and 6s if you really don't want KJ to get a ton of touches, because the more he carries it, obviously, the better he gets. And it does 2 things. Number one, it keeps the ball out of your best player's hands. And number 2, you're going to put the ball in the hands of a quarterback that doesn't have a lot of experience or any experience in games like this on a Friday night here in Iowa City. So you want to play to your defensive strengths, and that's force some passes, and You want to lessen your chances for damage, and that's limit KJ's touches.
Limiting those touches as well for Nebraska. Obviously, time of possession huge in this. Nebraska's 14th. Iowa's in the bottom 80s when it comes to statistically across the college football landscape. Does Iowa have a chance to slow this game down and kind of reverse that trend in this contest if they want to stay in it with Nebraska? Or is it the opposite way that Nebraska might need to play a little bit faster to keep up with the home crowd there at Kinnick?
Yeah, it should be raucous. I think them having a chance, and it's asking some of the hotel people that it was a little bit of a haze here the last couple of weeks, feeling like they've left a little on the table. But the sentiment was a full day here, having a chance to kind of get lathered up would kind of bring some of the fervor back. And like both gentlemen said, hey, it's Nebraska. They probably do want to slow the game down a little bit. They're going to get multiple looks. Nebraska front-wise will look a little different, I think, with the amount of down linemen they play with, and maybe one or two less DBs sometimes when they go to some of their bigger defensive sets. So I think it'll be methodical by nature anyway for Iowa. If Nebraska really wants to limit that time of possession, you got to get them off the field on third down. Right, because Iowa's going to be deliberate anyway. That's how they're going to play. They're going to hand the football off. They want to run the football, and because that's what we just talked about. That's playing to their strengths. But if Nebraska wants to really keep that trend going of TOP not in Iowa's favor, you cannot let them convert third downs. It's probably the second biggest statistic I would look at if you want to know how Nebraska's playing, and it's third down conversions. Iowa hasn't been good. You can't allow them to be good.
DB, is there any balance between, kind of daring Iowa's passing game to beat you versus the fact that that's sort of where Nebraska's been vulnerable on the back end is through these explosive passing plays?
Yeah, I tell you. So if you're not, Nebraska's problem has basically been, in my opinion, there are some games where, you don't love the one-on-ones, but a lot of it has been communication. So I think on the back end, talking to one another and understanding personnel. Hey, is this 21 personnel? We got one tight end, we got two tight ends. And what coverage do we want to play behind the base run front? Because you're going to see a ton of fronts where you're like, that's 5 D linemen, is that 6 D linemen? How many are in the box? So as long as Nebraska communicates on the back end, they should be fine. Iowa's not going to be the type of football team that's going to throw it over your head. And they also, there's not going to be a ton of confusion, right? Because I think the playbook with what Iowa wants to do is already a little condensed, and it's on a short week. So I don't think the eye candy and pre-snap movement and the kind of the schematics of X's and O's will deal Nebraska fits on the back end.
DB, you mentioned in Betting Bites earlier this week about how Nebraska and Iowa are pretty even on the special teams side. With it being the shorter week, the special teams has been a bigger factor in this contest for the past couple of years. Do you think that there's an extra wrinkle, either a blocked kick or a new look for a fake punt or something along those lines that people should be expecting to see tonight?
Well, that would be cool, but I don't know if Nebraska wants to tinker with it, right? You're starting to play pretty well on special teams. And I think the point that I wanted to make in Betting Bites is when you're playing a football team that has been the gold standard in special teams, you can actually have a serious discussion about tonight's game of whether Nebraska can play that thing even. Usually it's just a foregone conclusion that, this is Iowa and this is what's going to happen. But they're trending in the right direction, and they have for the last handful of weeks. So you kind of want to continue doing what you're doing more than you want to, hey, let's try something new. But I do know that it is an aggressive special teams, right? So they'll take a look at punt looks and see if there's an opportunity for fakes, or they definitely have it in the bag, but situationally it has to be right. I don't think it's something that they go into and they're thinking, yeah, this is what we're going to do, because Iowa is pretty sound. and they're extremely well coached in special teams. So they're not going to give you a lot of gimmies. You just have to make sure you don't give up any.
DB, last thing from me before we let you go here is, what's more replicable in your mind? The play of the offensive line from Wisconsin or against Wisconsin for Nebraska, or the success that Dylan and the offense saw through the passing game?
Well, that's tough. I think I'm going to go with the passing game, but primarily because they're only going to see a couple of coverages from Iowa, and they have to execute. The good and the bad with Coach Parker is, the bad is it's Coach Parker, right? I mean, he's one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. The good is, well, it's Coach Parker, and you kind of know what you're going to get, right? They're going to pressure you once you get inside the 20. That's typically where they do the majority of their blitzing, even though they don't do it a ton. You're going to see some quarter, half. You're going to see, like, fundamentally on the back end, they do what they do. Can you run with guys and have success with some of those mesh routes? They're going to get collisions, right? You're going to have to settle down and sit it in some soft spots against this defense. They're not going to be trailing. You got, Nebraska's receivers and man-to-man, and you can get those leverage throws on Iowa. You're going to have to be very smart with understanding what they're going to allow you to do, because it is very intentional how they play on the back end. So having said that, I'm going to save the passing game, but man, it would be nice if Nebraska could get the ground game going.
DB, we asked your guy Tim Verghese earlier in the show if we see that goal line package with Ty Robinson. Is he getting a carry tonight?
Yeah, I'll tell you, you asked me about special teams. I do think you will see a wrinkle or two on offense. I don't think it will be Ty Robinson, but Coach Overson is he's very creative, and it's a very good defense. And I do think you'll see a wrinkle or two in the red zone. I just don't think it'll have anything to do with number 9. All
right, DB, we've got Bet on It coming up next. You have a lock for me?
Ooh.
I haven't looked, but I'm kind of on a heater, aren't I?
You are.
You're 3 weeks of undefeated when you pick.
I'm trying to make a little money here, DB.
Well, you know what? You put me on the spot. I feel like Cam Newton. I got issues. I'll take a look and fire it over to you before the break.
All right, sounds good, buddy. We appreciate it. Enjoy your trip to Iowa City. Come back with a W for us, all right?
No, I appreciate that. Austin, thanks for holding it down, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for giving me the chance.
That's my guy. That's my guy, DB. Make sure you listen to him on the Husker Sports Radio call. We will be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We'll be right back in 5 minutes. We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back, Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR, and Lincoln. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That is Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill on the Pillar Exterior Stage. It is time for Bet On It, brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook, the best place in Nebraska to place your sports bets. Make sure you get to warhorsecasino.com to check out all of their promotions and a full list of house rules. And make sure you get out to the casinos in Lincoln or in Omaha to place your sports bets. Nearly every major sporting event, they've got you covered. That's Warhorse Sportsbook. No bets, no glory. All right, DB did give me my winner.
What do we got?
He likes Ole Miss versus Purdue in basketball tonight. He likes Ole Miss plus the 3.5 against Purdue.
Okay.
He's been on a heater, so we'll see how we'll keep a close eye on that one. See how that one goes. We talked about some of these matchups earlier with some of these road favorites, but want to kind of get them all nice and neatly in one spot here. Let's start with a couple of the games we already talked about. Tennessee minus 11 at Vanderbilt. Who are you taking?
That's tough. I think that this is a pumpkin game for Tennessee. I think Vanderbilt can cover. I think I'm going to go Vandy. I'll go Vandy.
I think I'm taking Vandy to cover as well. Yeah. We've kind of been on this train that not sure how good Tennessee is. I think I got to stick with it and put my money where my mouth is on that one. Next one up, Illinois minus 7 at Northwestern.
Oh,
I know you hate this one.
I hate it. I hate it so much because They might as well just play at neutral site. Just put this in Soldier Field for all I care, because it's the same place. Illinois is a more fundamental club. I don't understand the line. It doesn't make sense. And that's what concerns me.
It's a little stinky.
So in principle, I have to go Illinois, but I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, I don't feel good. I am going to take Illinois, though, because I just can't, in good consciousness, put any money on Northwestern. So I'm taking Illinois minus the 7.
I mean, they gave up 50 points to Michigan, who can't throw the ball.
they can't score at all.
I mean, that's the other, and that's, I think, a part, especially when you're wanting to put your money into a team. You do have to think about where's their headspace in this week, because some guys have already decommitted from the rest of this season.
Yeah, they checked. I mean, they're 4-7. They don't have anything left to play for. They're not trying to get. I mean,
they're academics. They could, if you go 5-7,
that's
you could get
true.
there.
They could sneak in. I'm going to go Illinois there minus the 7. Another one we talked about earlier: Notre Dame minus 7.5 at USC. Lincoln Riley legacy game, maybe. I don't know.
Horse. I'm going Trojan horse.
You're going USC here?
Yeah.
I'm going Notre Dame. They're about the only team in the country I think I actually know is good. I'm going Notre Dame here, and if they are who I think they are, they'll cover that 7.5 pretty easily. All right, let's go to some of the ones, some of the big ones we haven't talked about yet. Michigan plus 19.5 at Ohio State.
Close game, short game. I think Michigan covers, does not win. I think Ohio State controls the game. I think they lead throughout, but Michigan is close enough, but never a threat to win.
They're good enough at the ball control part that it never gets away from
It'll
them.
be like 7-3 first quarter. Michigan, had like maybe a big play or like a busted coverage that they got down the field and then they stall out. I think a lot of that will happen, but Ohio State overall will just keep making more plays and will win the game by maybe like 5 or something goofy like that.
I think I'm going to go Ohio State to cover here. They need this one. They need it badly. Ryan Day needs this badly. We talked to Stephen Means from Cleveland.com earlier in the week. And if Ohio State loses this game, Ryan Day has to win a national championship.
Yes, 100%.
Otherwise, he's going to get fired.
Yeah, Big Ten championship won't do it this year.
No, not even a little bit. Making the playoff doesn't matter. Like if you lose this game as Ryan Day, you have to win a national championship. And because of that, I'm picking Ohio State to cover. There is just so much more on the line there for them. Now, for chaos and hilarity, I will be rooting for Michigan, but I would put my money on Ohio State.
Would a 3-loss Ohio State team, and I know obviously that they would need to garner another loss like down there because they only have the one to Oregon.
Yeah. Yep.
But would a 3-loss Ohio State team?
So like if they lose to Michigan and then let's say, I think they'd have to win the tiebreaker. Indiana would have
to lose. But if the 3-loss and they lost to Oregon again, right, in the Big Ten title game, would that still be better than a 3-loss SEC team?
That's
because then you're putting them in the conversation like Alabama and all them, but then they wouldn't have played in their SEC championship. So
could you be in a world? I don't think so, but could you be in a world where let's say Ohio State loses, Indiana loses,
and
this
is nightmare scenario for Big Ten.
It is. It's a nightmare.
Because then it's Penn State, Oregon, because the only Big Ten team.
2-loss Indiana team doesn't make it in.
No,
a 3-loss Ohio State team probably doesn't make it in.
I think they would venture to the SEC first, yes.
So
especially if they lost to the stinky Michigan team. Yes.
So you're probably looking at all of a sudden the SEC feels about 3, maybe 4 teams in, but then you could be looking at, okay, is there a scenario where the ACC gets 3 in?
SMU, Clemson,
SMU, Clemson, Miami? Like, is there a scenario like how much of a disaster would that be for the Big Ten?
Tony Petitti is shaking in his boots. He hadn't considered this until he tuned in this morning.
I hadn't considered it until we started talking. And I was like, wait a second, this could get weird in a hurry.
Yes. But
so could the SEC slate. That's why, like, there could be a door open here for 3 ACC teams. It's a very slim crack in that door. But if you had told anybody that they were going to get 2, much less 3 at the start of the year, nobody would have believed you. And they would have assumed one of them was Florida State, who hasn't won a conference game all year.
At the beginning of the year, you just told the ACC conference, you're like, hey, you could get 3 teams in the conference, and it's SMU. They would be like, can you back up second?
They'd probably be like, wait, SMU's in the ACC
They forgot,
now?
yes.
Oh,
we hadn't finished that paperwork yet.
We
should probably sign that.
Are you sure? And Cal? What? Yeah, so that's one Ohio State has everything on the line, and maybe that goes the other way and it makes them tight. But I just think they're better than Michigan this year. I think I like them.
Before we get to any of the others, if it's a closer game, does that detract from Ohio State's playoff bid? Or if they win, they stay?
If they win, they're fine.
Okay.
If they win this game, they're in. They can lose in the Big Ten Championship.
I'm not saying they're in, but do they move further from where they're at?
Maybe. I mean, it might change their seed line a little bit.
They got to love where they're at in 5. That's a great spot for Ohio State.
Yeah, I think they probably move off of the 5, possibly, but I don't know that they're in danger of falling out. As long as they beat Michigan, they're lock stock.
Yes.
They're in the playoff. The seeding is just going to be interesting when we get there. Let's go to Auburn, Alabama, because we were talking about this one off the air.
I can't touch it.
Where Auburn's an 11.5-point dog to Alabama. You said if there's one game you never bet because you feel like you have no idea whoever's going to win, it's the Iron Bowl.
Yeah, if there's 3 things I do in this life every single day of my life or every year, I always tell my mom I love her at the end of a phone call. I pay my taxes, and I never bet on the Iron Bowl. I would never, ever touch this game, but since I'm being put on the spot, and that's what I'm here to do for Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Bet on it.
11.5 is a lot against an Auburn team that still has a lot of fight in it.
And
the
against
only
Alabama
problem
team,
is it's not in Jordan Hare, so I have to go Alabama.
And an Alabama team I trust is 0%.
I know.
I'm just 0%.
But see, that's the tough part is that this is the game that Alabama comes out and wins by 42. I'm going to go Alabama because in my head, everything that you doubt an Alabama program to be and you think that this game will be closer than it is, this is the game that Kalen DeBoer just goes, yeah, actually, remember Jalen Milroe September? He was great. That's the version you're going to get today.
Yeah, Auburn needs this one for bowl eligibility. Alabama needs this one if they have any prayer of still making the college football playoff. 3-loss Alabama. I think I got to go Auburn here. I think I'm going Auburn. I want the points. I don't trust Alabama as far as I can throw them. You've got a sleeper here. I know you like one.
I do.
This is important.
Huge.
For Big 12 and college football playoff implications. Arizona State, an 8.5-point road favorite at Arizona.
I'm telling you, I love Arizona State. They've been one of my favorite stories this whole season.
Big Kenny Dillingham guy.
And there would be no better school. Could you imagine a home playoff game at Arizona
in Tempe?
State? Oh, boy. The ESPN cameras. Brent Musburger would have a heyday at Arizona State. But a foreign
might get arrested.
A foreign's on the call.
Yeah.
Arizona doesn't have anything to play for other than to ruin a season.
Yep.
I love Arizona in this contest so much. And I have no X's and O's as to why, but it's just one of those games. You just get that feeling in your gut.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna float a little something over there, and I'm gonna pray that it does. And by the time 6:45 runs around on Saturday, I could be very disappointed, but I also want to be the one person that stood in front of the pack and said I was right. So I'm going to go Arizona on this one. I'm going to take it outright.
For what it's worth, it is, in my opinion, kind of a stinky line. I think Arizona State should be favored by double digits here. They're only 8.5. You could talk me into as high as maybe 13.5 on what they should be. They're only an 8.5-point favorite. I'm still going to take Arizona State because I think Arizona is not any good.
Yeah.
But that is a tricky one. Last one here real quick before we leave. Bet on it, brought to you by War Sportsbook. Texas, 5.5-point favorite at Texas A&M.
In principle, you have to go Aggies.
I'm going Aggies here at home.
Let's go, Trev. Bring it home, baby. Come on, Trev.
Horns down. Always.
And Farmageddon, go Clones.
That is Bet on It, brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook. Coming up next, we will wrap up the show and wrap up the week with Matt Vrzal.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Now let's find out what Matt Vrzal is better at. Telling stories or making pizza.
Matt.
Matt's an exceptional young man.
Matt Vrzal.
Happy birthday, Matt.
You know, Matt, he's a tremendous athlete.
Matt Vrzal.
Come on, Matt, I'm with you.
You know, like Matt Verol, you're one of the sexiest people in the world, but you're not one of the most beautiful. How does that happen?
Here is Matt Vrzal.
All right, Matt, thank you very much.
Wrapping up the show here on a Friday with Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla on Hurrdat Sports Radio. We're joined now by our friend Matt Vrzal, former Husker, owner of Paison's Pizzeria. What's up, Verz?
Not much, Ravi. How are you today?
Oh, we are doing all right. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was good. It's a day off, so that's always nice. Got to hang out with the nephews and the family for a little bit and played some games, won some money, and what else could you ever ask for, right?
What's on the menu at the Verz house for Thanksgiving?
Well, we go out to the Butte and Back Ranch. So my sister, she does a pretty good job. I wanted to try one of those. We smoked a ham and did the pulled ham, which was really good. Brother-in-law and sister kind of knocked the turkey out of the park this year. Sides, we made Tiny's mac and cheese, which was delicious. You've watched on the TikTok. That was fantastic. And then we got the solids that go through there, the old family staples. So, yeah, it's good.
I respect it.
We'd love to hear it, Verz. Glad you got to enjoy a day off. Wanted to ask you real quick about the Wisconsin game last week. I thought that was one of the better offensive line performances I'd seen from Nebraska in not just this year, but I thought in quite some time. Am I overestimating how they played because of the results, or were you kind of on the same page there?
They strung 2 good games in a row. So, it's the nature of people. Now we're all going to wonder, why we had the previous offensive play caller. Why didn't we have this before? Because this is the way it could go. And the fellas have done well. They've rounded into some form, and it's great to see them do that because they've taken a lot of heat. Some have defended them, for other things that they think may have resulted from non-positive plays on offense. Others have blamed them for that. So it's good to see them get some comeuppance in it.
For some Husker fans, they're going to be concerned about the cold in Iowa City today, but it shouldn't be a bad weather game by any means. But if you're a true road grader or a running team, the cold weather shouldn't affect you. You're probably excited about a game like this, right?
Correct. Yeah. If you're worried about cold, you need to go play basketball or wrestle. This is what the game is. It's as we dive into this 12-team playoff. I think some of these SEC schools, which are great, but coming up north and playing in the cold, going to be different. And if you look at those NFL teams, Green Bay still plays outside. The Bears play outside. Like, you got squad Northeast, all those teams all play outside. This is where it gets played. Football is an element sport, and welcome to the cold. If it bugs you, go play something else.
Verz, I know we've talked before. I think it's been a couple years now, but about how much better an offensive line can look when everybody on the offense is kind of on the same page in terms of what's being called and what the strengths of that line are. Is that what you've seen kind of occur over the last few weeks for Nebraska, or is there something else you've been watching there?
No, it's something. I mean, if you follow me on X, whatever, I just listen to Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell understands what teams are. Dan Campbell understands how to build organizations. Here's a quote: "To be able to do something that's greater than yourself, it takes everybody around you doing their job and doing it at a high level. You got to trust them. It's special. It's different. It's camaraderie to be the best and to be the best collectively." That's it. But we want to make things in these grandiose deals. I've said it for however long I've come on these shows. Until you care about your teammates' success more than your own, and until you do everything you can do to make sure your teammate is as successful or more successful than you, you won't win. You don't. If you're not in for the greater good, then it ain't going to work. And when you get guys to buy in and believe that, and that's not players, that's coaches, that's support staff, that's trainers, that's food people, the ones that feed you there at the training table. If everybody ain't going the same, there's a reason John Cook does what John Cook does, because they all believe it's for the greater good. That's what sports is about. And the quicker people realize that, Jimmy's and Joe's help. But if those Jimmys and Joes don't care about each other, it don't matter.
Matt, how impactful is a short week for this week? There's been conversation about, not enough time to go out and celebrate and think about already getting your bowl win, your 6th win, and being a rivalry week. You have less time to prepare, but is there an advantage to it being a short week for Nebraska this week and hitting the road, and you get to stick together and kind of build that camaraderie like you were saying?
Yeah, I think, sometimes we look for narratives, especially you guys, no offense, in the media. You got to find something. Like you're playing, this is game 12. Like, if you ain't got the gist of it by now, can't help you. And if you're just not super excited to go out and play after the effort you put out last Saturday, and it is fun to go on the road and to try to build that family atmosphere with your buddies, right? You get to go out and you get to have Thanksgiving together. Some of the greatest times I've ever had were the Christmas dinners at bowl games and no curfew. So it's like, hey, we're going to do this, and then we're going to go make some mildly bad decisions. And we're going to, hopefully, nobody goes to jail. So it's a fun thing to just be out with your buddies, and you're away from everybody. You call your parents, you tell them you love them, happy Thanksgiving, but you got work to do, and you got to go get the work done.
Verz, as we kind of look at the game today, if I told you before the season, hey, Nebraska is going to go 7-5, they beat Colorado, they beat Wisconsin, and they beat Iowa, would you have taken that, not knowing how the rest of the season goes?
Yeah, I mean, it's good by me. Anything that results in those guys for wins, they just needed to win. Like, there was far too much losing, far too much what was appeared to be just like, hey, this is how it goes for us. Like, changing your mind into we're winning every game we play, you have to win to do that. So it was just I don't care who the wins were against. I don't care what they look like. You just won. Like, I just needed winning. And then when winning becomes a better feeling than the losing, which I think sometimes up there people are like, oh yeah, that's how it goes. We do this and then we lose, and then it's, we go on to the next week. Like, winning is a drug, and it's great. It's an amazing high. It's a rush. When you get addicted to that, and then now, okay, this is the work that has to go into it. This is what we have to do to make sure we do this over and over again.
Verz, different forms of success offensively. A lot of teams win in different ways, but would you say a winning strategy for Nebraska today would be 380 yards passing through the air and only 7 yards rushing? Would you think that that's a way to win football games, especially at maybe a championship level?
Yep, as long as you got one more point than the other one, I don't care where the yards come from. All you got to do, there ain't no style points. It didn't say you won by this many. It says you won. And then they give you a trophy and medals.
There you go. Got to follow the stat line there.
Yeah. My first year at consulting went pretty good. Maybe I should have stepped back a long time ago. I apologize to Scott for costing him trophies.
Hey, the consulting gig, way better than the coaching gig, right, Verz?
It was fun. It was a good group of kids, good game. Bennington's built a hell of a program.
Yeah.
They do a really good job. Number 2 for them is he's harder than Chinese algebra. I mean, he's a tough kid. 57's another one. Like, they just got a bunch of tough kids, and Scott had a bunch of tough kids, and Term and the squad coached them up, and they did their thing.
Mm-hmm. Verz, I did want to say, really appreciate the job you did on the call on Monday. Was there a favorite player, team, moment you had from the championships that you has kind of stuck with you?
Thank you. Number one, that's very nice of you to say. My mom said I talk too fast, so it's good to get positive feedback. From a sentimental spot, knowing Brian Shaw and watching his 2 boys go out there, he did have another boy on the field. One was the center and one was the quarterback.
Yeah.
To watch them, the thing that always amazes me when you get kids up to that game and that level is how poised they are. Things, if you keep it with Sandy Creek, things weren't going real well. It's back and forth. Stanton's a hell of a team. I mean, clinical in how they block up front. But they just hung around, and turnovers happened. They converted them, and then it was really cool to watch that thing kind of shake out, and then to see, the battle that was West Side and Millward South was really fun. I mean, that was good football, good players, and getting to kind of highlight the talent that's in Nebraska on the football field was a neat thing.
Yeah, Verz, it was pretty cool over the course of the 2 days just to see the level of playmaking ability. You mentioned the poise. It is kind of, you do forget on some of these that you're watching high school kids because of the quality of play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, as a former player and coach and all that kind of stuff, I was up in the box and I was like getting jumpy. I was like, okay, you got to do something here. But you look down at the kids, they're just calm as day. They're like, hey, this is what we got to do. Okay, let's go do it. Get her done. And away they went. So it was cool. I look forward to it every year. It's a really fun day. And thanks to LP for dragging me along and my amateur play color guy status. He's a good man.
Verz, we appreciate the time as always. Hope you enjoyed the time with your family yesterday, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, boys. Hope you had a happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Verz. That is Matt Vrzal, former Husker owner of Paisan's Pizzeria. That is the show for today. Thank you to Austin for filling in. Thank you to Sasha for saving our bacon this morning. And thank you to DB for joining us while on the road in Iowa City. Enjoy the time with your family, and most of all, enjoy the game today. Let's get one more win in the regular season for the Huskers. We'll have more Hurrdat Sports Radio on Monday.